Hello, good evening. Welcome to our budget workshop where we'll be hearing from Superintendent Langlis about the school budget. Yeah, please proceed, Superintendent.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about some highlights and some things that we want to share through the budget process. As you know, school committee starts their formal budget presentations at the start of March. We've had numerous meetings since the budget began. Going back in time, we start the budget process in and around December, where we start planning and trying to forecast what we think might become of our financial situation from a state subsidy perspective and trying to look at the different revenue sources. This year we started off pretty conservative. We knew that we were going to have a pretty challenging budget year. Feedback from the council last year was, I think, supportive, but also looking to be conservative. So we took that approach when we started our work. As I work through the document, if you have any questions that have to do with the binder or the revenue sheet that I handed out or anything else, please feel free to let me know. So in this first slide here, I just have some pictures of just things that have happened in our schools, in our community over the last few months. We have lots of imagery, lots of things, but I really want to center on, and I'll close with the bottom left, the bottom right, and the top right, and the work we're doing around having the ideology, the thinking, the foundation, the mission, that every single student that walks into our schools is a future graduate, no matter what age. So when we talk about that, we talk about what kind of community are we striving for. We want to cultivate and grow productive, contributing members of our community. We know that we want graduates who know how to be their best selves, so they're making good decisions, leading their own lives, raising their families. We also want to know that we're growing leadership and leadership capacity in our community so that we can move forward into the future economically and in so many other ways. But people need emotional intelligence to do that, to thrive in those arenas. And we can't just assume that some students will have it, some won't. We have to teach it. And so that's some of the work we're trying to do. And I think one of the key notes from tonight is, and we'll talk about a lot of detail, when state funding is reduced, which is what happened this year, we have some choices as a community. And we can step up to that challenge of that shortfall. We can find middle ground, or we can go with what the state subsidy has done to the prospective budget and the revenues. Want to revisit our budget goals, things that we believe add value to our work. We can't achieve all of these things, but these are things that we aspire toward. We want to improve our instruction systematically, improve our special education structure, which we, as you know, took a big step last year. We'll talk about a number of reductions in positions this year connected to the steps we took last year. We want to grow pathways to graduation. That progress is happening and going well. Obviously maintain equity, social, emotional, and coping skills development efforts. As you know, school safety is always a priority, especially in today's world. And something I'm really proud of that our team has done top to bottom, stability and communication. I think that our team has worked to that end, but it's a lot of work to continue to do it, and so we're committed to it. I mentioned the conservative approach. We're trying to run as lean as we can, transparent budgets. I hope that you all feel that we've been transparent about our process, and I'll continue to answer questions you may have. Did share a pretty long document with you, but I hope I prefaced that by saying, yesterday anyway, that it said that some of this was encompassing reports, but there's tons and tons of information there. I didn't look to overload, but gotten different questions from different counselors and also members of the community, so we wanted to put that document together, share that with you. We want to implement a fund balance strategy within allowable constraints. There's a lot of state language around what we can and cannot do with fund balance and those constraints, but we want to navigate that as well as we can to maximize the potential for our community. I'm also looking to build a responsible reserve. I've reached out to area superintendents. Every district around us has a reserve as part of their process and their budget. We currently do not. An organization our size, I really believe, should have a reserve, especially if we're looking to run lean should things come up. Right now, there'd be no mechanism to activate those funds. Fund balance requires your approval, referendum, things of that nature. So reserve is part of the conversation that we want to have. Kind of the bad news this year in the budget cycle is that state subsidy was reduced, and it was reduced in Lewiston significantly. So much so that at the end of January, when we heard numbers, we started asking a lot of questions, verifying things with the state. And to advance the story a bit, a couple weeks ago, it was discovered that there was a mill rate calculation error statewide, and it resulted in a shift of funding to us of $804,000 to the good. It still leaves us incredibly short of where we anticipated being, but it's a correction that helps. In that same conversation, within the day, I shared with the school committee, it felt like a roller coaster. We got word that they were looking to change some of the rules for special purpose private school tuition. So these are our outplace kids. Right now we pay as they go. The proposed language to pay every day of the school year. That's a significant financial impact. They ended up withdrawing that language. The latest we have heard is that they're reworking that language, but we will see that language at some point. That makes it hard for us to do our work, you as well, because we don't know what that number might be. We've seen a reduction on the forms that we get from the state on a subsidy called the ED 279. It went from a 0.2 to a 0.15 as an increased ratio for economically disadvantaged students. We have a fair amount of economically disadvantaged students, obviously, in our community. So when that metric reduced, it reduced our state subsidy. The history of that is that it was elevated during COVID and then reduced back this year. The problem with it, we didn't anticipate it, and doesn't sound like any other school district did either. We have a reduction in special education reimbursement. Kind of that cycle of funding, you got to spend it to get it back throughout COVID, and it's about a year and a half delay in that cycle of funding. During COVID, labor shortages, what have you, we spent less in pockets because we didn't have positions full. And in that response, as part of our revenue money coming in next year, we have a reduced amount of money coming from the state for those services. I can argue the model all day. I'm not a fan of it, but that has a financial impact to us. That's big. The state mill rate valuation went up, and so the long and short of it, at least the way I'm trying to explain it to people, is the state decided, based on valuation and money coming into the state, that communities could afford more for schools. I would love to have been at the table for that conversation. I think our community is unique. We can't just go raise a bunch of additional funds, as you know. So that assumption to me, I think, was hurtful in our subsidy formulation, but it was essentially the state's way of saying, we believe communities can pay more than they are for schools right now. We also have shifts in distribution of funds, and this is post-referendum. This is stuff that Heather and I have talked about a fair amount. We get school-based subsidy disbursements at the very end of the cycle, like June 30th, July 1st. That doesn't do us any good here because those disbursements have missed the referendum process. And so we're trying to use those funds in a smart way to build off of things like LCIP and what have you. Cost drivers, I'll say this a number of times tonight, but in essence, the bulk of our budget is our staff. Between contractual increases, benefits, and insurance costs, things of that nature, that have this consistent growth to them that are built in, the subsidy is not keeping up with it. So when we see a loss of subsidy, a reduction in subsidy, all those contracts still take the steps. So we end up with this offset, and that becomes a big gap. We have health insurance increases of $540,000. We had some savings there. We budgeted 12% and ended up being more like 5%. So that's a significant reduction. That's been activated in this proposal. But our overall salary increases are $3.1 million, which sounds like a big number, but it makes up, about 6%. And we settled, I think, 5, if not 6 contracts in the last 18 months. Overall salary benefit increase of $3.7 million. We still have some debt service from our high school expansion. We have essentially mandatory costs associated with the Department of Justice and the Department of Education. And in part of that is, we talked about a lot last year, but it's activated now in our salary scales, the teacher minimum of $40,000. I'll argue with anyone all day that teachers don't make enough money, because they don't, in my opinion. But they have a negotiated contract, and that minimum influenced other steps. So certainly there was a cost associated with that. Overall inflation, cost of goods, shipping, delivery, all of those pieces, just like everyone's household, those costs are up. We also have sunsetting funds from the emergency relief efforts following COVID or through COVID. And so we're looking to put supplies and other items that we have used federal dollars differently in the last few years to generate a fund balance as efficiently as we can. That is not something that will continue. And these funds are sunsetting, and that's going to present challenges, but again, that's why we talk about things like the reserve, so that we are phasing that through. We mentioned last year multi-year approach. We continue to take that. Also, a popular item or popular items after school and summer programming. Not all of it was in our Easter funding, but portions of it, and we've put those portions back in this budget. Position reductions. There's 61 positions reduced in this budget. Of those, 21 are filled, 40 of them are vacant. We try to be very thoughtful about all of the impacts of all of those positions. Very difficult for me as a superintendent to sit here and say that number, because I believe our kids need those supports. But I also know that we have a challenging budget that we have to be real about. Again, I'll mention with state reductions in funding and contractual obligations, it just costs more to provide less. So I have a slide here about where does the money come from, and this is all referencing the revenue sheet, but I tried to break it down so it's not quite so many numbers. The state subsidy makes up about 62% of our proposed budget. State debt service, so these are state-backed projects at Farwell, Geiger, and Connors. We get revenue from the state as part of the cost of those structures, and so that revenue comes in, but it goes to debt service. That's about 5% of our budget at this point. The local, I put it in bold on this slide. The request in this is $27,574,771, which would make up 27% of our whole budget proposal. That's a cost to the local taxpayers here. We have some other smaller funds. The big one I want to point out, not smaller, but the fund balance. To start this budget process, again, this was part of that multi-year plan to get here in future years. You see that there's a use of $5 million. The best way I can explain that is it's unspent funds from past year or years, and we use it to reduce the burden here locally in addition to what they've already paid to create that fund balance. So those funds are used in that way. My caution to fund balance is the day we don't have any, that's the instant shortfall regardless of subsidy. So if we get 3 years out and we have no fund balance, we have a $5 million problem before we even start the budget. And so that's why we're trying to be smart about reserve and using fund balance in a tiered multi-year way. And the whole general fund, including adult education, is there at $102,786,891. Again, that's reflected in the bottom of that revenue sheet. You can see how that's broken down. The reduction totals, we pulled from, we had some ebbs and flows because of the different state language that came up, but all in all, this budget reflects a $4.3 million reduction in total, made up of largely those positions that I mentioned, the 61, some projects that I just think will be less expensive in the future, so we want to hold off, and the insurance correction. And when I say insurance correction, we budget, this year we chose to budget 12%. We don't know that number until the end of March, early April. So when that number came in, which was just in the last 10 days, we're able to correct the budget, and that's reflected in the budget. This is I took a screenshot of the list of positions that were proposed for reduction to the school committee. If you look in your slides, you'll see that, but also I attached the memo from the day we did the presentation to the school committee to the very back of your packet. If you want to see it in full context, that's probably hard to see. And if there's any questions about any of those roles, I'm happy to answer questions.
Where did the assistant principal come from?
Right now, that assistant principal, if reduced in this proposal as stated, would be at Connors Elementary School. We're trying to do the very best we can with all of the need. I can tell you that the folks at Connors don't feel like they need one less administrator. Increase requested. This budget lands at $1.70, up from last year. A shift from 1097 to 1267. I want to kind of point to the 1097. It's a number that's a little bit different. It's adjusted with that summer allocation that we get. But I just want to make note that because of municipal rules and the way the referendum has happened in the past, those funds don't actually come to the school. So it shifts the required amounts, but it doesn't end up in the school, at least directly in this kind of budget process, like it would in a smaller town that doesn't have those rules. That's not anyone's fault. That's just the way the structure is set up. This request, I've heard a lot of folks in our community talk about a $30 mill rate, if that's at all possible to do. I know that's a big lift. If the budget were approved at the school level at 1267, it would leave 1733 to be at that 30. A little bit repetitive, but again, 7% of our budget is staff compensation and their benefits, and our state subsidy covers 62% of our budget. In this next slide, again, that multi-year look ahead, we don't have the benefit, just like you at the city level, of just thinking about the current year. We have to think multiple years ahead, and so we're doing that. The sunsetting of COVID funds is something we've mentioned and talked about numerous times, but those disbursements have all but sunset. We have one fund remaining for the next school year. Tied up in that fund are already approved items, a couple of which are pretty big HVAC projects that we want to improve our school's infrastructure with. And there are still some positions in there that I don't know how we'll carry forward following the sunsetting of those funds. We're also, again, still trying to be smart about that fund balance piece to soften that blow of the future pending cliff of those funds. So if you are out of relief dollars and out of fund balance and you don't have a reserve, you definitely have a problem. So we're being intentional about that. I want to note that running too lean presents risks for us. Beyond legal and not providing services, it does pose some risk to us. I do think a reserve fund should be established with some criteria. And another note that we've, again, paused some projects or scaled back on some projects because of just the costs, which I think has impacted everybody. So with that, my recommendation, I'm carrying forth from the school committee, which voted on this also, was to come in, present, and ask for support for a $1.70 increase on the mill rate. I'd like to avoid additional fund balance use, and I'd like to support the changes that include the significant position reductions. Again, they hurt. I'll be upfront about that, but I also think they're responsible. We looked at things like classroom size at the high school, and in spots where the classroom sizes were lower than I think they needed to be, we reduced those positions. We also reduced some other things that are pretty challenging, but we think with the restructuring effort, we're able to provide services differently, and we're working through our IEP processes to make sure that those documents reflect the structure that we're building in an effort to try to house more of our students that we send elsewhere. And in the long run, this is going to take a few years to continue to build, but in the long run should save us some funds. And again, maintain that multi-year fund balance strategy, and hopefully with a reserve. My last slide from this respect is to just talk about that future graduate piece. I selfishly plugged my son on the bottom right. That future graduate mirror is set up at Farwell, but I know I have permission to use that picture, so I did. But the bottom left is a picture of a student named Nemo, who I met right out here at the concert, the kickoff piece to get the school year going. And it was just the sweetest exchange ever. And the idea of having that t-shirt to give to her, she just lit up. And she had never thought of herself as a high school graduate. So I think that's a conversation we want to keep going. Up top, you have some students from McMahon who earned Tiger Paws for doing good things, and they got future graduate shirts also. just little plugs, I think, to recognize our kids, the hard work they do. And really, before I close, definitely want to say kudos to our staff. The work they do every day is just unbelievable. We have the best staff I could ask for. Really impressed with all the hard work they do for our kids and our families. So, with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Superintendent Langlis. Appreciate you being here and appreciate you, your presentation, your willingness to answer our questions here. I'm sure there are a few. I would like to start with, I'm sure you heard the proposal to combine the DI director and the school's SEL position. Can you just speak to that?
I mean, I can probably speak to it at length. I think in short, I would say that the two positions are fundamentally different. And so I get the sense that the city role, and I could be wrong, but my impression of that is it's more of a human resource function. And in the work that they're doing is really, that Melissa's doing is really around that human resource component around DEI. I think it's an important role. I know that not everybody at the committee, the council may agree with me, but I do think it's a critical role in a city like ours that has such a diverse population. To think that we're there where we need to be around equity in our community, I think would be inaccurate. I think that we are, we're taking some good steps, but we have a ways to go. But to that point, I would say that our SEL and equity resource position is fundamentally different. This work with us is around Ruler, which is a model from Yale, which I could share with all of you. And it's really about emotional intelligence and understanding how to be your best self and what to do when you're not. And so whether you talk about little kids or some of the big kids that we had meetings about last night, they have to develop better coping strategies. They have to develop better skills, and we have to teach them. That's been a focus of that role. And so to me, that's a teaching and learning in the classroom, in the buildings kind of job, whereas the other one is more managing adults and how we go about things from an HR perspective. So I'd be curious about some kind of collaboration, but I don't know how that particular one would work for us. I just think they're fundamentally different.
Thank you, Superintendent. Further questions or comments from the council? Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Superintendent Langlois. I just have a few questions. I was going through some of the information you had sent to us a couple of days ago, and one of the things that stuck out to me, and I don't know why, but that it shows that there's 8 new principals this year for a total of 32 principals. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so last year we restructured our special education department, and we had what was called special education supervisors. What we were finding in that was a massive turnover, and we had to go away from that model. And what we did, the cost difference was not substantial, but what we found is we needed to create consistency in that role, because that role was leading to inconsistent IEPs, inconsistent requests for staff, which are some of the corrections that you're seeing in this model. Just a lack of flow in services for kids, a lot of unhappy parents and families, a lot of unhappy partners who are charged with working with Lewiston Public Schools to transition their children from CDS and other specific resources. There was just a lot of breakdowns. And when we did our analysis, we had an audit done. Also, Assistant Superintendent Paquette and I interviewed as many people as we could think of, administrators, assistants, teachers, and some community partners, just to get their input on how do we stabilize this thing. And what we found was that was a pivotal role. We've made some other changes, obviously, but those administrative roles were specific to improving that consistency at the building level for kids and families and programming. Labeled as administrators because they are, and they are paid on the assistant principal salary scale. The difference in cost we had figured out was about $6,000 per person, from losing people every year to keeping them every year. As of right now, we have not received any notice from people that have chosen to part ways with us at that role, and to me, that's a big win. That helps us build capacity and consistency from IEP meetings all the way down to what is the programming like for my student when they go to school. So that's that additional positions. not realized from a budgetary perspective until last year's budget was approved.
So principal, is that principal and assistant principals? Is that what that number is?
It's an assistant principal.
I know, but the total of 32, is that principals and assistant principals?
Yes,
Okay, because that's why it
because I
sounds
don't
so
have
much.
32 assistants or principals, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm just going off of your numbers, and it just sounded a lot, 32 principals, but I can see if the assistant principals are lumped into that tally, that makes more sense.
So also lumped into that are directors and assistant directors. So our technical center, those are director roles. They're really the same.
Okay.
They have different titles because of different language required by state
Okay,
rules.
so just for tallying things up, they all get lumped together?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What else do I got here? There's a increase of 5 superintendent/management. Are those the ones that were reclassified? Is that what that is?
So they were actually in the wrong spot in the
Right.
budget. So yes, they were moved, so it looks like 5 new, but it's really not. They were being charged out of the wrong code according to the state.
Okay. One of the things that concerns me is the talk at the state level of increasing teachers' pay by $10,000. How would that impact our budget if that goes through?
I would love to think that they're also going to follow that with appropriations. I don't know how we'll do that if that happens. I think that would instantly create a massive budget shortfall. I don't know how to surmount that, to be honest. I'd like to think it comes with an appropriation. Again, I would argue that teachers are underpaid for the work that we ask them to do, but we have to also have the revenue to pay them.
Okay. I'll come back. I got to dig through my book.
Sure.
Thank you.
Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Superintendent, and the school committee for this budget. And I know the original starting point was significantly higher, and I just want to thank you for the cuts that have been made. Although these 61 positions definitely hurt, especially the 21 that are currently filled. But I think any further cuts would severely undermine the service that you're providing. So yeah, just again, I want to thank you, and I'm comfortable with this ask where it is.
I seem to remember in a previous school committee meeting, will we be able to find room for the 21 positions? Or
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
Yep, I believe that whether it's attrition, vacant positions that will come up over the summer, we always see some movement. I do believe that we'll be able to employ the folks that were in the general fund that have been reduced. I am not certain we'll be able to employ folks that are in the federal relief dollars. Again, not really a topic specifically tonight, but I just want to be clear to anyone listening that in the general fund, I believe we can find a home for those folks. The ones that are in the ESSER or COVID relief funds as they're sunset, we are not in a position to guarantee that we'll find a position. We'll work with people, but we won't be able to place them on.
Understood. Counselor Jelinek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this presentation tonight, and I have a few comments and a couple questions. I want to get at the prospect of, funding for the outsourced students regardless of whether or not they're attending. So in other words, a capitated contract, so it's gone back and forth from what I'm understanding, but there's still some back and forth. Do you have any idea of when we will know what the direction will be?
So I don't know when specifically. My understanding is the word emergency was used. And when you use emergency rulemaking at the state level, it shrinks things. So it's not a legislative process. This will be DOE and State Board of Education conversation. And then they'll open it up for 10 days whenever it's released, 10 days only, and then they will make a decision. And the challenge to that process is that should that happen, say, in 20 days, it's in effect immediately. And so not only does this have massive budget implications for next year for us, it has budget implications the day after. And so whatever's decided, it will shift the invoice.
That's a big deal, but I think, what I heard you talk about earlier in terms of, a longer-term goal would be for LPS to consider doing less outsourcing and more provision of service for special purpose in-house. I mean, I think that's commendable, but definitely something worth looking at. It's going to be a big difference. I was looking at the cuts, and I noticed that under the special education division, there were 36 cuts, and I guess I'm curious, of those 36 cuts within special education, because when I say that, the word legal and binding document comes to mind for me, how many of those positions are already vacant of the 36 cuts? Was that some of the 40 that you referenced?
Yeah, about half of those special ed positions were vacant. I don't have the exact number. I can do some digging and get that back to you.
Okay.
But those were not all vacant positions.
Okay, all right. As someone that's in LPS on a weekly basis, sitting into IEP meetings, the conversion of some of these special ed coordinators to assistant principals has been absolutely a game changer. So I thank you for that, because the consistency is noticeable and big changes have happened. So kudos to you for that and your team. And the last thing I want to mention is, at the beginning of the presentation when you talked about future graduates and that need for emotional intelligence to thrive, and you talked about maintaining equity and social and emotional coping skills. And as someone that's really focused my energy in my life in education and early childhood education, we've been pushing that down. I mean, we can do reading and writing and arithmetic all day long, but at the end of the day, it's not going to matter if those foundations are not there. And, these are parts of curriculum that are just so important. So I'm just very appreciative of someone, like I said, I've been a lifelong educator doing this work, and really appreciate you calling this out. It's important work. Thank you.
Thank you. I would add to it, my brain works in numbers sometimes, that there's an economic factor to that. We may not realize it tomorrow or the next day. But as students grow in this way, when we talk to employers about internships, apprenticeships, and we think about how can we better serve you? And what they say is, we want the soft skills. We want kids to show up on time, be ready to work, get along with their colleagues, treat customers well, and that's all SEL work.
Exactly. Thank you.
Councilor Scott?
Thank you. Superintendent Langley, can you just talk about, for that special purpose private school tuition fund, what was the amount that we put aside and that was voted on? I know that, that I had a conversation with you about using fund balance for that, and that would drop the our portion of the mill rate down to $1.34 versus $1.70. And I just was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that. And I know that Councilor Jelinas just spoke to that. I think it's hard for us to make decisions when we don't know from the state what's going to happen. And a week later, we still don't have an answer. And how do we fulfill a budget and fulfill our duties without knowing?
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. It's really a big challenge. So the funds that, ironically, what we had done just prior to that news coming out was we took $500,000 out of that line, thinking if we can't spend it, and it's this tight of a budget year, maybe we just don't budget it. And so we reduced our special purpose tuition line by $500,000. And it was like the next morning that it came up that this shift had happened and occurred. And so it instantly made me very concerned, and we needed to put that $500,000 back. And I asked our special ed director, Kirsten Crafts, to at least formulate, and she worked with her team, and they went student by student, and the kids on our wait list, what would this cost? And it was an additional $800,000. So a swing of $1.3 million in an item that the week prior we had said, I think we can live without this. I really, and I used the word gamble in the school committee meeting, because I knew whenever we're not meeting our obligation, if there are spots, if these folks find more staff and they can take our kids, we're going to run out of funds to support it, which would also be illegal. And so we have to be able to meet that metric in the middle. So in that budget proposal for the $1.70, we did return the $500,000 in the anticipated $800,000 increase that we still don't have an answer on, but that is part of the $1.70.
Thank you.
Further comments from the council? Councilor McCarthy.
I found my one last question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In 2018, the 2018-2019 school year, the minimum local share was zero, was even with what the state was recommending. Now with the budget you're proposing, it's somewhere around $7 million more than the minimum local tax. Does that make sense? I mean, do you understand where I'm coming from?
I do.
Okay. It just seems like that's a big jump in 5 years from the minimum required by the state to what we're paying now.
Yeah, I agree. Part of that component that that document that I shared with you, I put a chart in there just to try to reflect, if you had X amount of dollars at 5%, what does that do annually? And it compounds itself, and unbelievably so. And it's a concern of mine also. I've long said that this won't be solved now, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. The way in which we fund schools in our country makes no sense whatsoever. We ask communities that have varying levels of ability to pay a big portion of the bill, through property taxes. I'll join the fight to change that process, but the other factor to this is that because the state has, I don't want to say, use my words carefully, the state has adjusted the subsidy. In doing so, you get into the politics of like the 55% thing that came out last year and things like that. But overall, our local minimum share, by projection, has dropped in that 5-year window. So it creates a metric of the state says, we're giving you more money from the state level, so you need to raise less locally. So the local minimum share number continues to drop, but the budget isn't, because we have contractual increases. And so you have the state saying your local minimum share is this on a slow decline because they're contributing more, when in actuality, these costs and these expenses and these contracts are not getting less expensive. And so we have a line that slowly ticks up, just straight contracts. If we add nothing new at all, we have this 5-6% growth per year based on the contracts. So when the local minimum share is actually less by number, it makes the ask look bigger. It's a big ask, I understand. But if you go back and look at the local minimum share, in 2018-19 on the revenue sheet, this is a kind of an easy look. In 2018-19, I just want to show you where we're at too. This line here. Yep. And you can see that the states that the local minimum share is 18,893,264. And this year, multiple years later, it's 17,525,000. How, in all the world of budgets that we all know, whether it's our household or schools or city, can the local minimum share go down over that window? And that's all part of the state formulation. So when our subsidy is reduced and our required local minimum share is reduced, that's what creates that multi-million-dollar gap that you just mentioned. It's a very observant detail that you picked up on, but that metric is a heavy hit.
Thank you.
Councilor LaChapelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wrote down a few thoughts. I'm so torn up right now. Who doesn't want everything we can do for our children of our city? But a $1,000 increase in property tax on a house worth $250,000 isn't acceptable. My phone hasn't stopped ringing with calls from senior citizens of our city stating that they can't afford their rent and can't afford to stay in their house that they lived in most of their lives. How do I tell a person who has worked their entire life, I'm sorry, we are raising your taxes because of the budget? We have a very large senior citizen population in Lewiston. People who worked all their lives, contributed to building this community, planned and saved, and want nothing more than to be able to spend their senior years in Lewiston, the home they love, but that seems to be ignoring their modest needs. Let's talk about the Lewiston Public School System. Superintendent Langlis said at our last joint meeting that he was still waiting on numbers because he had approximately 20 students not counted, and with the system receiving $15,000 per student, each student's presence or absence would make a huge difference. Well, I have 10 nieces and nephews in Lewiston who are now being homeschooled instead of in our school system because their parents, like so many others I hear from with increasing frequency, do not agree with the direction of our schools. At $15,000 apiece, again, that's a whole lot of money hemorrhaging out of our system. We as a society have allowed the great decay of our education system. Our students are soft, and our adults seem to be encouraging them to be this way. Rather than helping them develop their strengths and full potential, the old idea of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, the idea that built the best of this country and the very best of Lewiston itself, is long gone. We allow students to take the same test over and over and over until they pass, reinforcing the message that there is no need to study, try at all, or accept responsibility for their choices. Members Whitlow and Bowden nailed it a few weeks ago by questioning the ice and mud weeks, in addition to summer school. This has gone on for years. If you wonder how this soft on education approach works, you'll find the answer by looking at the workforce today, which increasingly rejects personal responsibility. An employee doesn't feel it necessary to show up for work on time, stay off their cell phone, or even work an entire day. This didn't just happen overnight. It all started years ago with the decay of the family and the lowering of our standards in our school system. A few weeks ago, we heard from the commissioner of the Maine Department of Education state that social emotional learning, gender and race, and diversity, equity, and inclusion will take priority over academic subjects such as math, reading, and science. That's just wrong. This comes from the same department that promoted a video for younger children telling them that then when they were born that sometimes the doctor made a mistake on their gender. I don't have time to break down how cancerous this cell program is, but like all cancer, it must be removed. No matter how many teachers and school officials are asked to give Cell nothing but rave reviews, there is actual evidence that Cell's. Where is the actual evidence of Cell's effectiveness? Does it seem strange that students are continuing to deteriorate academically, mentally, and emotionally, despite the presence of this supposedly amazing Cell program? This philosophy that appears to be wonderful on the surface, but is doing great harm to our children by creating confusion about their identities, has spread throughout all of education. There is an example now right in our Lewiston school system. We have a student who wants to transition. With the help of the school, this child goes to school as one gender, changes at school, and has everyone call them by a different name: teachers, staff, students. Then at the end of the day, change back and go home. This is done without the parents being notified. Unbelievable. We don't have to go to California. That happens right here in Lewiston, Maine. This is so dangerous to the children, not only physically, but even more mentally. 72% of these children have depressive symptoms. 52% have considered suicide, and their suicide rate is 10 times higher. Our schools have chosen not to get parents involved. Where is the accountability here? Parents have a right to know what's happening in their school system. We can speak for hours on this subject. I believe in a parental bill of rights. At the same time, we must insist that parents take responsibility for their children and become involved in the schools. A number of our students are just completely out of control. They are not getting guidance or caring from home, so they bring it to the schools and frankly raise hell with everything. It was surprising to hear the tone of some of the school committee's decisions on the budget recently, with one member actually saying, if the city council wants to be the bad guys and gals, then they can be the bad guys and gals, right? It will just be another story in the paper. Or better yet, another suggested that we don't care about the children. Really? That's just asinine. It's like me saying you as a school committee don't care about our senior citizens, or the fire department, or the police department, or the roads we drive on. That's not true, of course. You care, and of course we all care about the city. Tough decisions must be made as a consequence of poor decisions made in the past. We should have been better stewards of public funds, particularly when we were fully aware of when various temporary funds would dry up. While well-educated children are our future, the school system is dependent on the fiscal health and stability of Lewiston as a whole, which is something we don't currently have. I would request that both bodies roll up their sleeves and work as stewards of our limited communal resources, rather than frame financial responsibility as a matter of bad guys or good guys. I cannot support this budget the way it is. I cannot support this budget the way it stands with CEL and DEI taking the front seat over our schools. Our children go to school to be educated, which is what will give them the tools to live productive, fruitful lives after they graduate. It is even more essential that the students from challenged backgrounds be given the education they need to reach their full potential and thrive. Looking at our bottom of the barrel proficiency numbers shows us that while our school might be doing well confusing and indoctrinating children and letting them raise hell and harm education for everyone, they are not succeeding at their job, which is providing measurable, successful educational outcomes. Thank you.
If I may.
Yes, Superintendent, would you like to respond to some of that?
Well, I guess in part, it sounds like a prepared statement that I did not receive in advance to have any chance at trying to respond to in a real articulate way. I do think there are laws that protect the caps on property taxes for senior citizens. I also know that some of what Councilor LaChapelle mentioned was family choice. Homeschooling is a family choice. There's even concerns now that you mentioned that I also have concerns with. As recently as today, people talking about colleges taking a no grades approach to credits and diploma degrees at the college level. We're about 2 years into the effort with SAL here locally, at least. From my perspective, systemically, we're in its infancy. So if employers are experiencing things from that dynamic, it would only be kids that had 1 year last year as high school graduates or high school students. I don't know that it's had enough time to have the effect that it needs. But I can echo some of your concerns. I don't think that schools are doing everything perfect. I don't think we're nailing it every day. I know we have a whole lot of people working really hard, and I know that the level of need that our kids have is great. And so we're going to continue to work at that with whatever budget we end up with. We're going to do our very best. So I respect your comments and your statements. I don't know that I agree with all of them, but I believe that they come from a foundation of thinking that that you believe in, and what I do appreciate is you and I have had conversations about some of these items, and you've been upfront about it, so I appreciate that.
Further comments from the council or questions? Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I listened to what Councilor LaChapelle had to say. A lot of it falls into the same category of things that I'm thinking about. The only thing that I'm going to comment on here tonight is
Excuse me, Councilor Clement, do you mind getting
Sorry about that. The only thing I can comment on here tonight, Mr. Mayor, Superintendent, I cannot see myself supporting a $1.70 increase. That alone puts us over $30 per thousand, and we've done nothing, absolutely nothing for the city side of the budget. Okay? My theory has always been government should exist, number one, for public safety. In that case here, it's police and fire protection. The number two step should be education, but that's number two. And I don't hold with the fact that we don't care about the children. We do. But we also have a significant senior population. We've done a lot of things this year to try and make it better for them. There's an ongoing fight for senior housing, all sorts of things. We've established a senior advisory council to advise us more fully on needs and wants of our senior citizens. But one of them is to feel safe in their home and know that they can continue to live there without being taxed out of existence. What are we supposed to say to them? It's easy to sit back and say, well, here is the budget we give you, and I believe he alluded to this good guys, bad guys thing. I don't think there are any good guys, bad guys. We should be a team working together. And I think there is room to improve what we're asking for from our taxpayers. Like I say, $1.70, we haven't even begun to do anything on the city side of the budget. Our police department, we've just brought them in the last 6 months, I believe. Chief is back there, I think he's nodding, to almost full strength. We were down at one point 17 members out of an 84-member police department. You just can't exist as a city of this size with that few. They're working forced overtime, bad things will happen. Okay, fire department, you know, we do very well in that regard now. But we have other needs. I mean, we get the calls, I don't know what your calls, the daily calls consist of, but my calls are about potholes, paving, the fact that I can't drive down my street now without tearing my teeth out because there is no pavement. When are you going to do something about that? When are you going to do something about this? And all of those things. They never talk to me that much about the schools until it's budget season. And then why such a big increase? So I'll leave it at that. I just can't see $1.70. I think we've got room to work, and we need to work. Leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor LaChapelle, did you have something else?
Yes, and I want to thank you and the school committee for the passion that you folks have. I've been there, sat in that seat. You have a passion for the kids, and thank you, and your staff. We have to look at the bigger picture also, not just the children. I love the children. Yeah, my mother was educated in the Lewiston school system. I was, my children were, my grandchildren are in the Lewiston school system. I love this town. I love our city. There's a lot of fine work that comes out of it. Is there a way, I'd love to try to keep the mill at 30. I don't know if that's possible. That's like dropping the school down to 1 instead of 170. In the city, we get the county side. It's, after you leave the LCIP, we're gonna start ripping into that, and there's a lot of things that we're cutting on this end, like staff every place else. 170 just can't float. Is it possible to get it down towards the 1-ish? I know
It's teachers in classrooms at this point. It really is.
Yeah. I understand, but I can't support 170.
You first, Councilor Jelinas.
One more question. You talked earlier about doing an assessment of the class sizes at the high school level. Superintendent, what is the average class size at the elementary, middle, and high school level?
We actually pulled that data. I'm kind of looking over my shoulder to see who might be able to remember. But the elementary classroom sizes, I believe, were all above 16, in the 16 to 22 range. And at the high school level, we reduced, I want to say, either 6 or 8 positions based on classroom size numbers already.
No, what I meant was the size of the
Sorry, do you mind using your,
What I meant was like the size of the class, how many students are in the classroom?
Yes, no, the elementary level, it was 16 to 22 students.
Yep.
With some variations. And then at the high school level, we saw some pockets that were a little lower, and we reduced, I can check my list, it's either 6 or 8 positions at the high school because the class sizes were, again, not big enough to try to maintain it in this budget. But the average class size, I don't have that offhand, but we did a lot of digging around that. I worked with the high school administration to narrow that field.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
my son is a sophomore at Lewiston High School, and I will remind him that he's a future graduate and needs to get his homework in. Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned that, he still has a couple years left after this year. Yeah, and I'm concerned by what you just said, if we're going to be cutting any more, it's going to be teachers in classrooms. And I understand the need to, I agree that it's a tough budget, and yes, we do not have money for everything, but I am concerned if we're going to be, making cuts that actually harm our students' future, and then harm, the school as a going concern. I'm concerned about staffing and retention as well. And it's 170 is for sure a little tough, but if that's where you're telling us we need to be at before we start cutting into bone, I'm okay with that.
My fact checker folks are behind me, Councilor Jelinek, and they said the class size average with these adjustments is 20 at the high school.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you. So in our conversation last week, I'm gonna bring up what I spoke about last week again. And, my big concern, this $800,000 that the state's asking for the special purpose private schools, that's a big chunk. Because when I talked about it last week, and I talked about the possibility of using the fund balance for that, and I understand the scariness of that. But by removing that $800,000, that left us at $1.34, and we were still able to have that nurse, I believe. We were still able to have keep the $500,000 for the special education, to keep the 2 LCL positions for the elementary school, and we were able to have those other things. If we start having to have a conversation around dropping another 34 cents, I have to say that I would be very concerned. I don't know how we do that without actually affecting now the students and staff in our schools at a significant level, and that concerns me. I was comfortable with the $1.34. I would be not comfortable with going lower with that. I know the work that our staff does for our students. We know as school committee members, especially with what we experienced last night in a disciplinary hearing, which we can't go into detail because that is executive session, but we saw significant need for some of those SEL positions, particularly in the elementary school, which is what I've always said is where I think the most important work can be done on that level. And I still have some questions about, how we're using that with a 17-year-old. I still want to have those conversations with you. And as a school committee, member from the city council, I think that's an important conversation to have. But I do see what's needed. We saw it specifically last night. When we have a staff member that has to spend a vast majority of their day with one student in a school that has 500 or more students because of the special needs that are needed. It's significant. It's significant. And when it's a regular thing and a basis that happens on a regular basis, if we remove staff from school, we're going to start seeing students falling through the cracks. And I really fear that. We had that in the past, students falling through the cracks. We start talking about, our graduation rate, and we're going to see differences. And we want to focus, I know the school committee wants to focus on the regional tech center and what's being done there. Ensuring, one of the bigger conversations we had through this budget season is ensuring that we have our students that are going to those programs having the certifications that they need, their OSHA certificate cards, their plumber certification, because this means when they leave our schools, they can start a job right away. They go into internship programs. We talk specifically about, the needs that we have in the schools around our gifted and talented. We're not just talking the special needs students and the students with social emotional needs bigger than maybe other students. We're talking about the students that are on the robotics team that might be affected and that can't become the kids that are able to go to those events. We're talking about the debate team who's the best in the state who may not be able to go to those events. We're talking about the kids that do the other programs, the theatric programs, and I get worried about that. I get worried about that because, I also am a graduate of Lewiston High School. So are my children, my grandchildren. My grandson goes to Farwell School right now. We have a wonderful school system. I think we have a wonderful school system. I feel I'm a product of that school system. And I don't want to give or take away from what we need to give to our students. It is really difficult when we ask our teachers and our staff to do all the work that they do, and they do a significant amount of work. And when I would fight for more pay for them as well. And I said it at the school committee meeting last week, I wish I had all the money in the world to give to the school department, because we would see more. We need to give more. We can't do that. We have to think about these things. I understand where our council is coming from. I understand the $1.70 is a hard ask too. I voted against it last week. But to go lower than the $1.34, I'd have a real challenge with that myself. I would. And I say that, and I say the $1.70 and the difference there, and it's that $800,000 cost. That's what we talked about. That's where my focus is. If we can figure out a way with that, then we can do what we need to do. But it's scary. It's scary having these conversations. I've heard from a lot of constituents as well. I hear a lot about the roads. I hear a lot about the concerns with our homeless situation in our community. And I will tell you that I had 3 older citizens that live in the Sunnyside Park neighborhood, 2 of them that said that they were retired ladies in their 80s. They divulged that information to me and said that they support the schools 100% in the budget that we're proposing. That's the comment I got. I have gotten people concerned about the overall budget. I understand that. There's still conversations that need to be had at the city-wide. But let's remember that there's a lot of people in this community, 36,000 people, and we need to hear more. We vote on this budget on the 2nd of April, I believe? May, excuse me. My God, I'm off by a month. Sorry. We will have more conversations on our budget side, but will there be, and you'll be presenting to the public, when is that date?
There's a town hall on the 4th of May.
Okay. Okay. I think it's important that the community come out and voice their opinion. Thank you.
Superintendent, when are we going to hear about the 800 or that ruling from DOE? Do we have any guidance on when we might hear?
Yeah, the hard and fast is, we don't know. They may not pursue it. What I've been told is they're looking to modify language that would put a cap on the daily rate, but not that they've walked away from the language of the rule change itself.
Thank you. Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the mill rate is only half of what determines our property taxes. The other half is the valuation, and we haven't done a revaluation here in decades, and it's currently very low. If we were at full valuation, our taxes would be under $23. Our mill rate would be under $23. I'd also point out that if the concern is about people choosing not to move here or move away because of simply taking a look at the mill rate, people also choose where to live based on the quality of the schools. And if we got the schools, then I think we stand to lose just as many, let alone sacrifice the future of the people who do stay here. So just wanted to point those things out. Thank you.
Councilor Jelinas?
Thank you. I think this $800,000 thing is really making it complicated because, we could be talking about 174 versus 134, right? So that's really hard. I mean, it's not your fault. It just is what it is. But then I think about like revenue, and I know that, there's in that chart that you showed us, I think it was under less than 1% for under the other category, which includes Maine Care and those kinds of sources that we can go after. I think it was the chart that, where's the money come from, that one. Is there an opportunity for that percentage to be increased? Because I'm just trying to, I know I'm grasping at straws, but I'm trying to find ways that, we could, not be looking at teacher reductions or that sort of thing, so I'm thinking about that. And then I'm thinking about, clearly there were some calculations made when we began to consider students that we were outsourcing to special purpose programs and those that we felt that we could serve in-house for less than six-figure digits, like, oh, whatever. I mean, it's expensive, right? So I don't know if either of those needles could be moved.
It's a delicate balance between employees and space
Yeah.
and what we can provide. And so the labor market's been a challenge. We certainly have limited space in our schools, but we want to maximize that where we can. Anything we do there would help program locally and save funds. As far as the tuition and how, from like a billable perspective,
Yeah.
we could see some cycling on future revenues a couple years out, if that happens. The challenge with special purpose private schools, and these are truly students we can't serve. We just don't have the capacity. The level of need is really,
Significant.
really severe. We also are responsible for their main care seed. And so the money going out for that effort is significant. So we have that line between if we can serve more here, we can save some funds both on tuition and transportation and seed and billable things, which is, I think, what you're alluding to with the revenue piece. Because when we provide the services in-house, we can also bill main care for those service packages, which it generates revenue for us. So that's some of that other that you alluded to. When we send students elsewhere, we can no longer bill for those services, but we are on the hook to pay for them to be provided.
Thank you.
And as several counselors have kind of alluded to, the school, along with the county and the city, the school makes up just one part of the tax rate, and we are certainly working on the city side. Administrator Hunter, based on your adjustments from last Thursday, we have come down considerably on the city side. Is that correct?
That's correct. We started at 247 and we're down to 83 cents.
We still have some meetings left to go. Thank you, Administrator. Further comments from the council? Superintendent, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just thank you for your time and the questions that you have shared with us over the last several weeks. It's been helpful and I think informative to the process. It helps us know what you're thinking and what we're looking at and trying to have facts behind our conversations. So just thank you to the council.
I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the school committee here. Thank you for your service. And I appreciate all of our educators here. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to stand at ease for just a few minutes and then we'll gear back up. Yeah, oh, that's true. Yeah, but if somebody wants to. And we're back. If I can have it quiet in the council chambers, that would be great.
She deferred.
And also quiet up here too, please. If you two can introduce yourselves and then please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Heather Hunter, the City Administrator.
Tracy Roy, the Finance Director.
So on tonight's docket, we're reviewing the capital request. We had the initial listing that was provided on page 34, 35, 36, in that area of the budget book. You also received a preliminary sheet that comprised of 3 pages that showed how the fund balance has moved around since you was initially included in the presentation, as well as moving about $500,000 of the LCIP request over to fund balance, and then looking at, as part of the budget adjustments at least presented to council at the last meeting, moving another $842,000 into fund balance. Since that time frame, we do have 3 more changes that I can send that out to you as well, but they all deal with the various Riverwalk paths from different capacities, and looking at deferring most of those. So at that point, it brings the proposed fund balance usage from the sheet that you have of $1,553,854 down to $1,333,854, or 12.4%. So when we move things out of there, obviously that allows us the flexibility to do one of 2 things. We can move things from the LCIP over to fund balance, so to avoid the bond cost on them, or we can elect to retain the fund balance. That would be the council's purview. So I know during the presentation on the LCIP, we talked a lot about the projects. Throughout most of the budget presentation, we've talked some about some of the elements that were being recommended coming from the operating budget onto fund balance. The department head team is behind me, so if there are any specific questions on any of the projects recommended from the proposed amount in fund balance, or what's still left on the LCIP list, they would be happy to answer those questions. So at this point, I would turn it back to the council.
You sent us an email, I don't know, a few days ago about the Muhammad Ali statue and the site work to prep the pad needed for that. I guess for the public's benefit, can you just explain, or?
Yes, that initially started out at $160,000, reworking some of the estimates and fencing that would allow us to kind of grow that complex over. We are now seeing that reduced to $70,000 to at least start with the initial base area and the pad for the statue, and a couple of benches and a little concrete and brick patio, if you will, around the statue and the fencing that abuts the canal.
Okay, and is that LCIP
That's going to be
item, is that in or out at this point?
right now. It's moved over to fund balance, and it is currently in at the reduced amount of $70,000.
Okay, and just to be clear, the $70,000 amount still allows us to place the statue there?
At this point, yes.
Excellent, thank you.
So just so everybody knows what line we're talking about, I'm talking line 94 on your sheet. And on your sheet, you will have a different amount because the $70,000 just came in. So that amount is down to $70,000.
I understand that the statue will be done here in late summer, early fall. Will, pending approval, of course, will that site be ready in time?
That is the goal.
Okay. Counselor Pease, did you have your hand? Oh, okay. Further questions, comments from the council?
Sure.
Counselor LaChapelle?
Sure. I've got mine all highlighted, so I haven't had an opportunity to look at all of this. Under item 1, advertising and marketing, $130,000. I know it's city-sponsored large events. Again, refresh my memory for what events is that?
That has not been specified, other than the holiday party. We do look at having a multitude of different events at various levels. Those would be brought back to council at some time as we're getting close to outlining where we're looking at allocating that budgetary line item.
And I'm just going to throw out some of my ideas. This is not indicative. I dropped that down to about $80,000. I noticed you had your next one under marketing at $48,000. You deferred $13,000. Actually, I left the $48,000. Coming down to line 7.
Sorry, if I may have a
Certainly.
question really
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
Just to be, just for clarification here. So the 130, this placeholder, we do not have a plan for all of that 130. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, and then, but for the 48, do we have a plan for all of that 48?
We have an idea. It depends on what the final amount ends up being, how that gets executed.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, please continue, Counselor.
And
Just for clarification,
Or-
if I may.
Counselor Scott?
Thank you. You're suggesting dropping the 130 to 70?
to 80.
To 80.
And then, but keeping the 48?
I'm fine going down to the 35,
Okay,
yes.
that-
I'm fine going down to the 35.
Can we put that one on the parking list too then? Because I think that I would like to keep it at the 35 also. I'm just
Okay.
adding to that while we're
So
going.
I'm just making suggestions, and if it's fair with the mayor, if anybody, when I'm mentioning something, if I go over, please somebody speak up. I'm just going over what I saw. Line 7, the cameras, 2 weather cameras for Public Works, 13. I see you have that deferred, so that's not in the budget at all?
That's correct.
That's, okay. Please. What's, not line 10, $3,200? Fourth in clients at the library. We need fatter people there? What's,
Those are referring to
Those are the
computers.
computers, yes.
okay. Okay. I'd fit in on that. Due to budget situations, I eliminated that. I'm sorry, line item number 10.
Mr. Mayor, can I bring the IT manager up to speak to that?
Director Starr, please join us at the podium. Yes, can you please expound upon what that's for?
Sure. The thin clients, we've started replacing computers at the public library, and they're just a small unit that doesn't have a lot of processing power. We use them to provide public access. And this year, we were finishing up replacing the units in the children's area, and that's the last floor to complete the library replacement project.
Doesn't the children's, oh, I'm sorry.
Please continue, Councilor LaChapelle.
Doesn't the school system have, don't they get those Apple laptops and tablets from the school system already?
I'm not actually sure what the school
Our s-
system does, but
So, if I may, Mr. Mayor, the laptops are now staying at the school department. They bought some new machines that, I think they call them islands or something like that. You might be, I'm not familiar with the terminology, but it's where the students put their laptops in every night before they go home, so they're not going home
They
with.
lost too many of them?
I think that there was all sorts of different issues with it, yeah.
Okay.
I can't speak on the specific, but I know that that is something that went into effect this year. So, like the middle school students that have laptops every year, those are staying in those cabinets each night to be recharged and ready for the next day's use.
I think the high school students can still bring it home, but don't quote me on that.
Yes, and I don't know how many there are. I'm not sure exactly on that number either. My point being, I wouldn't assume that all students have a laptop at home.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
so,
No, yes, Counselor Pease.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My items are on 20 and 21, line item 20 and 21. It's the windows.
I'm sorry, I thought we were continuing with the thing clients.
Yeah, I guess how I'd like to proceed at this moment, counselors, is, I guess, since Counselor LaChapelle is in the middle of his list, we will finish that list, and then, Counselor Pease, I will make your list second, so as soon as we're done there, I will, if we haven't already talked about the things that you're concerned about, we will move to, and then we will proceed in an orderly fashion until we've all worked through our lists, if that's okay.
That's fine, that's my mistake. I thought we were just, anybody had one they wanted to.
Well, and it is a slight bit confusing, but we all might be chiming in on something that Counselor LaChapelle says, and so, yes, yeah. All right. Thank you, Counselor Pease.
so I guess I'm not as caught up on the $3,200. I withdraw my
Okay.
objections to that. I jumped down to line 16 on the intrusion alarm system, $30,000. Can you bring me up to speed on exactly, that's for City Hall? Is that
That's for City Hall. If there is a break-in, nobody would know about it.
That's not cool. Okay. I'm going to jump down to 21, which was Councilor Pease, 20 and 21, the partial window paint replacement and the window replacement project. That's $59,500.
She parked 40 of it.
Where,
I've already removed that.
okay, again,
That's
okay.
fine.
Thank you.
I guess Administrator Hunter, if it's already been
Yes.
removed, just chime right in.
Yes, please, I don't have the system in front of me up. The line 28 for the parking garage, that's the camera system, you've already eliminated those two? Is that?
No, what that is, and that's still in the budget, is there was an LCIP request for that, and then as we got updated estimates with the technology, there was a shortfall in the estimate. So this is actually adding another $65,000. You will see from the LCIP list on
30.
line 103 and 104. There's the rest of it.
Okay. Okay. I just had questions on it, so I'm fine with that. The next line, 29, the vehicles, one full SUV and 3 mid-size SUVs for the police department. These are, and I went back and read up on it, these are not end-of-life vehicles at this point, are they, Chief? Were these the same ones that we talked about earlier?
No, those were cruisers that we funded earlier.
Okay, so what are these SUVs for?
So normally we budget for 7 vehicles. This year, we're only budgeting for 4 vehicles and accessories, 3 Explorers and 1 Tahoe. Last year was 4 marked cruisers and 3 CID unmarked cars. This year, in 2024, we're only requesting 4 cruisers instead of the 7 total. The extra cost is due to the Dodge abandoning their platform, so we're not going to have Dodge cruisers anymore, which now makes us forced to purchase all Ford Explorers and Tahoes, which then cause us to need new equipment, the cages and everything, because they certainly don't fit in the Explorers or Tahoes, because they fit in only they're retrofitted for the Dodges.
Okay.
I realize there's only certain things that we can use the drug forfeiture fund for. Can we use it for vehicles, or?
We can use it for police equipment, so I would assume, I'd have to check and make sure that is one of those. I don't think we ever have, honestly.
So there are some accessories that have been funded already through the drug forfeiture, but most of those accessories are for the cruisers themselves, not for the SUV vehicles and so forth.
Okay. Yes, Councilor McCarthy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee, when we approved the SUV for the, that resource person, we had discussed that resource person getting a used vehicle out of the fleet and using the SUV that we purchased to be a frontline vehicle. So I think we should be able to take at least one of those out, as that is, that's what, as far as the Finance Committee goes, that's what we had discussed. The person doesn't need a brand-new SUV frontline vehicle, so that's what we had discussed. And we had spoken to,
Sergeant Rostron.
right.
Correct.
And he had said that that was a possibility, so I'd like to see that, at least on the parking lot.
Okay, I'll get with the police chief on that, and see what changes can be made on that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess since we're talking about with the settlement funds, correct, Administrator Hunter?
Correct, the opioid.
Yeah, I guess I would also be interested to see if that would be, kind of an allowable use, or whether the settlement funds would have to purchase the used vehicle at fair market value, or...
Well, what I'm thinking they're saying, and this is why I need to check with the police chief, is if we don't trade in one of the used vehicles and slide that over, there's really no cash outlay from that standpoint. We just forego the trade-in value, so that's the compromise. I would need to see how that would look to see if that trade-in value is acceptable to charge to the grant. But I will get back to you on that.
Okay. And is there a hesitancy to use drug forfeiture funds for an actual vehicle, or what are the thoughts on that? Deputy Administrator.
It would be my understanding that we can't supplant funding that we already have. The funds can be used to, well, we put some of the additions on when Chief St. Pierre talks about the equipment inside of it, we can use that, but because this is something different. But we can't take away, we've budgeted something, we can't take that away and then use the drug forfeiture money for that. That's not an allowable use.
Understood. Thank you. Councilor Herman?
Thank you. Just to be clear, there are, I think, a couple terms were maybe used interchangeably. There's drug forfeiture funds, and then there's the opioid settlement funds, which are two different pots of money, right, with two different lists of restrictions on them.
Correct.
Okay.
I was referring to the drug forfeiture funds. I don't know what the requirements are for the opioid settlement. I'm sure the city administrator knows that.
Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If memory serves me, the council sort of balked at buying a new vehicle anyway. And the money that was appropriated, it was up to, but let's see if we can get a used vehicle instead of buying a new vehicle for that position. So that's why the Finance Committee looked at moving a used vehicle and giving the new vehicle to the police force to use. Thank you.
Councilor LaChapelle?
Thank you. I now jump down to line 32, Clerk of the Works. Well, and to come back, I'm fine with just eliminating one SUV from that one before. Clerk of the Works for mill number 7 outfit. It kills me to spend $150,000 for that, but I've been talking to a lot of engineers. Is this Clerk of the Works just going to be doing mill number 7, or are they going to be overseeing, like, the fire department? What are they doing more than just mill number 7?
Yes, that we've assigned that project the significant renovations to the armory, as well as the new fire substation would fall under that domain.
So at first, I was really against that position, but after studying it more, and I'm just sharing my thoughts with the council, let's look at our existing police department right now. somebody in their infinite wisdom decided to take all the steel from inside that building out when we were running short on funds. A clerk of the works would have been able to sit down and tell everybody, that's not a smart idea, and would prevent it. The clerk of the works is just going to watch over our funds to make sure the stuff is done properly. And if we're looking at a $12 million investment on the police department, an $8 million investment on the fire department, and God knows how much on the armory, $150,000 is not much to make sure it's all being done properly.
And this particular one is assigned, but it's a not to exceed that amount.
Okay.
So you do have budgets elsewhere, but again, they're not to exceed amounts.
It's a well-qualified individual.
Exactly. And my deputy city administrator is overseeing him, so he knows to minimize the billable hours on that project as well as others. And this is about half of what we paid for the contracted clerk of the works for North Temple,
Yeah,
just for that.
I'm coming to that one. Yes. So I just wanted to verify on that. Then I jump all the way down to 49 and 50. Sidewalk repairs, replace decorative light poles. I was going to get rid of both of them.
I would ask my Public Works Director to come up and speak on both of those items.
Director Brenchak, please join us at the podium.
As for the sidewalks, that 40,000 is for miscellaneous missing gaps, broken sidewalks where we're not doing the street paving. I got 3 emails about that today. So it isn't the programmed sidewalks that we do with the paving. Those are under the whole paving program when you do the whole street. So these are sections of pieces that are done. So it's a small time and materials piece. So it handles different types of complaints. If they're not getting their street paved for 5 or 6 years, they get the sidewalk piece fixed. That is crumbling. So it's a small amount of money that goes a long ways.
I would also add that once we get notification of somebody tripping, slipping, falling on a sidewalk, it's first protected under the Maine Torts Act, but now that we know it and if it's not fixed, then it becomes our liability.
Okay. Replacing the light poles?
These are ones that have been hit and missing, that were hit and runs, didn't get reimbursed. You see missing poles in a lot of different locations. They're $5 to $8 grand each. So this isn't a great number of them, unless we want to start taking them out to places that we have them that we don't want them. You don't want gaps, like Canal Street has got them all the way down.
We get some nice poles in a parking lot across from FX Marcotte.
Do you want to take those down and relocate them? We could do
Yes.
that.
No, I'm not in favor of that.
Well, it's tight budgets, yes.
Yeah.
So I still stand by removing the $50,000 for decoration light poles. I'll leave the $40,000 in the sidewalk. I jump down to 53 and 54, 2 roll-off containers. That's for trash.
Yes, it is.
So
It also is for ash.
For the
Trash.
ash. And the shelter for
All
the
of them.
drop-off area.
The shelter for the drop-off area is that there still is someone that is outside year-round checking the loads coming into the lot. It isn't at the scales, and
Okay,
that,
it's not at the scales.
it's not at the scales, right? It's inside the lot.
Okay. I hate to say it, 59, the public art plaques. I know it's only 12,500. Those are those little plaques that I would gladly pay for one in front of my store, because I think and I know a lot of businesses would gladly pay for it. I was going to suggest removing that.
What plaques,
These are for plaques for the installations that have already occurred. So we had various grants in between Choice Neighborhood, the Maine Arts Commission. We have not installed the plaques yet in front of them that talk about the name of the work, who the artist is, a little.
Those for the public. I thought it was plaques for buildings.
No. So what I've done, and you will see on the element that I sent you, is that's highlighted, and I'm not sure what color it's highlighted on, kind of a pink color. But if you go down to line 85, we had started a public art fund, kind of seed money. I've taken that out of the public art fund seed money. That's why that's got that funny little color there.
So,
Oops.
No, I'm good. Please continue, Counselor.
on that piece, if I might. So you cut the 50,000 fund, 12,500 for the public art fund, and then 12,500 for the plaques.
No,
Am I reading that
I'm
right?
keeping the plaques, but I'm kind of paying them from the public art fund that
So is
leaves
the
it.
public art fund dropped from 50,000? Because that is one of the ones I had a question
Yeah,
on.
50,000 to
37?
37.5.
Okay, that's right, okay. I just wanted to double check.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
The trail headlight at Garson Trail. Line 62.
Is that for the new stretch that was just completed?
Correct, it's the street side, right at the entrance.
Tree purchases on 65. I love trees, but 90%, 80% of the state of Maine is treed. So I suggest eliminating 20,000 for tree purchase.
So that has
And-
been reduced by 8,000, so it's now down to 12,000.
Can you,
I suggest eliminating $12,000 for tree purchases.
Director Brencheck, can you speak to that, where those trees might be located, how many trees we're talking about, if you know that, if you know that info right now?
I know that Steve keeps an ongoing list. The ones that we're working on next is on Central Avenue and going back to neighborhoods where we've taken them out and putting them back in. So he has a systematic list that I can share with you on that, but we're probably talking 500 to 800 a tree when you're looking at the 4-inch size.
Councilor Herman?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a process question as far as, like, we're putting these things on the parking lot. How are we going to go about, like,
So
are we gonna
what-
vote on each thing, or?
What my recommendation would be is, once we get kind of everybody's list of where we would do, we'd start at the top, and I refer to it as thumbs up or thumbs down. So if I have, in this case, these are reductions, so when you do the thumbs up, it would be, I need at least 4 for it to stay on the reduction list. Is traditionally how we've done it, just to kind of get a consensus on those items.
Right, thank you.
And Administrator Hunter, to that end, I see you taking notes there. And so would you be providing us with a clean copy so that
Yes.
way we can, because
Yes.
there's a lot of figures being talked about right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to move ahead towards some of the larger figures. The next page, page 77, Public Works Facilities Fire Alarm System. I was going to take out.
Director Brencheck,
Yes,
we need you back.
that's a public safety issue.
Is it required by law for us to have it in there?
It is in current codes when you have existing buildings. There's grandfathered, but right now we went to do a fire drill and we have no equipment to even do a fire drill with. So everyone is at risk in there. And again, we have shops, we have welding, we have lots of different operations going on in that same building. So the 2 safety projects that we thought were the most prevalent was the fire alarm and the barrier between the air control between the garage and the offices. So those are the 2 projects that we have under the Public Works building for a building that has a lot of deficiencies. Is it illegal? It would be if it's new, but because it's a grandfathered 1940s building, it is what it is. Is that correct, Louis?
So jumping down to line 85, that's that public art fund, you drop down to 37, whatever.
Yep.
I suggest cutting that in half to 25. Destination amenities, 86.
If we could go back to the 25, is that 25 including the plaques or 25 plus the plaques?
$20 plus the plaques,
20 plus the plaques? Okay.
32.5 or
So
something. like
cutting 17.5?
that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Destination amenities, I was getting rid of it altogether, $100,000.
Okay.
What are destination amenities?
We have not, that's kind of like the events. It's something that, when we did all of the Riverfront Island master planning discussions and seeing all the creative things that we can loop in, not only in that area, but up, in the areas that are impacted by that, is to put seed money. Do we want to do special lighting? Do we want to have elements for destination things for people to come in town to see? It had not been targeted for an amount yet, or a specific element yet, but those would be researched and brought back to council and use this money for.
To support the Riverfront Island Master Plan.
It's not just the Riverfront Island. It could go all the way up to Park Street. It could go, it's just
It could be
one of
something
the.
on Lisbon Street.
Exactly.
I see.
So it's just to have a pot of money there if there was something, whether it be, an amazing feature for a holiday lighting that attracts. It could be something that we do, whatever we choose as a painted sculpture, that you see in front of it can run the gamut on what our destination amenities would be.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Administrator, we're saving $100K, and then ideas would be forthcoming, which would then have to be approved by the council.
If this is eliminated and we have an idea, we'd either have to absorb it in something else and do a budget transfer, or the council would need to do a supplemental appropriation.
Understood, but if we keep this here, the council will still be able to vote on whatever
Correct.
this gets spent on.
Correct.
Right. I would advocate that we leave this here for right this second, so staff can get back to us.
It's on the parking list, so we're not cutting anything right now. Thank you, yes. The service vehicle for the LCIP, the airport?
That's already been eliminated.
Deferred, okay, thank you. And then I'm just going to finish off the page. I'm jumping down to the Ali sculpture. I know you'd said earlier that's dropped down to $70,000,
The plaza, correct.
the plaza. Ouch. It's another freaking park with stuff.
It's a hardscape.
Okay.
There's nothing to mow. Maybe occasionally
It's
a
another
weed.
Park. It's another park.
Sweet.
I'd like to put that on the parking list and talk about it. And I'm just jumping down to 96 and 97, comprehensive plan implementation.
I'm sorry, what numbers?
96.
I believe the Director of Code and Planning may be behind me.
Director Hediger.
Yeah, in the past, we've actually asked for $100,000, but we've been pretty busy doing a lot of things right now, as you folks know. And at this point, we're just looking for $50,000 in the event that we have time over the next 12 months to actually move forward with another section of the comprehensive plan. It may be a zoning and land use item, it may be economic community development. I mean, there's many aspects of the comp plan, but if we get to a point, whether it's you folks or the planning board wants to see something happen, and either our department or community development doesn't have the resources, there'd be a little bit of money there maybe to get the project going forward.
You mean like to pay a consultant or something?
Correct, right.
Yeah, I see.
Yep.
And you're doing a marvelous job up there. Good job. But I'd like to cut it in half, 25,000. Public Works, vehicle wash design, 97.
That would be back to my Public Works Director.
I read the article in there. I just,
Okay.
yeah. So I would, again, hard choices, I would eliminate that. Did you say the cameras security jumping down to 100 and 101? Camera security projects,
I have camera security projects as 103 and 104, 80,000.
no, yeah, 80,000.
Yes, those are still in there.
Those are still in there?
And where are these cameras?
They're for Southern Gateway and Lincoln Street.
Right.
$80,000 apiece?
They're very expensive.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, those are individual cameras.
okay. Yeah, I have it as one.
So I would defer to either my building director or Craig, the IT, to comment on those.
Mr. Turcotte, step right up, please.
I can't see who's behind me, so.
They're all here. Well, almost all of them are here.
So,
Louis Turcotte, Facilities Manager. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Administrator.
So we have 80, I don't have the paperwork in front of me at the moment. We have 80,000 at Southern Gateway and 80,000 at Lincoln Street. Is that the way it's listed? So, well, I'm trying to make this you had 65,000 for cameras that you talked about a little bit earlier. That's supposed to accompany the Lincoln Street $80,000 project. So we when I estimated the project to get the numbers in time, I misestimated. I was basing it on the other garages, cost escalation, and the size of the garage weren't included. So the total project for Lincoln Street is the 65 plus 80,000.
so Louis, my understanding is right now the cameras are only on the entrance and exits of the parking garage, and these would be added where?
This would give us full coverage, all the travel lanes and all the stairwells, top to bottom, similar to what we have at Oak Street and Centerville.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just sitting back and saying, we're paying $80,000 a garage, and then we have security that's traveling around to the garages. We're spending a lot of money on the garages. Is this a net neutral situation? That, how much money is the garage is going to generate for revenue once the gates are fixed? Where are we looking at that?
That's the piece, because you figure the gates were still inoperable during COVID.
Correct.
So we have not had a true good number post-COVID.
Okay.
And as you recall, the two of the three garages that they're doing security on are not where we're talking about camera. The only duplication here is Southern Gateway.
Okay. Thank you. I guess we can come back to that. And my last but not least, I'm going to jump down to line 103. It's the LCIP listings on vehicles for Public Works. And that we're going to find on page 80 of the LCIP. And I know Director Bruncheck might want to go to the mic on this one, because I had a few issues on it. Page 80 on the big LCIP. So, one of my suggestions was going down, the third item down, the half-ton pickup truck and the three-quarter-ton pickup truck, is just eliminate one of each and just give, instead of two, just one of them. 47,500, and the three-quarter-ton, 52,000. I can just list down the bunch of them, Director Bruncheck, and you can tell me what you think after, or even in the hallway, tell me what you think after. The two half-ton electric pickup trucks, no. Altogether, eliminating electric pickup trucks. The service truck, 1, 2, 3, three more down for $75,000. I guess I want more information on that one. And the next one for $140,000 electronic powered litter picker. What is the cost of a gas one or a diesel one? What's the difference in cost?
It's about $20,000 difference.
Less?
Less for gas powered.
Yeah. Lewiston does an amazing job. I have to commend your department. They do an amazing job on getting out and working the sidewalks, not only downtown, but they're everywhere. They're, wherever we have a sidewalk, I see that little buggy going. I've been called out to one of my stores in the middle of the night, and I drive by and I see that thing plowing, so they do a good job. The vacuuming on Lisbon Street, they're constantly out there. I see them. They do a real good job. My question to you or to the administrator, how do we compare to other municipalities? I just don't see other municipalities doing what we're doing. And as a service to our local merchants, as a service, you know, we talk about plowing your sidewalk in front of your store. Other municipalities are charging businesses for not doing it. Have we ever sent out a bill to anybody for not plowing?
No, we looked at correcting the ordinance or rewording the ordinance, but we have not done that.
I know there are some businesses that are screaming about plowing. I just want to commend, I think you're doing a fine job on plowing. With that said, though, I would eliminate the electric-powered litter picker of $140,000 and convince me why we need that service truck for $75,000.
I missed all your deletes on the pickup trucks, but pickup trucks just in general are the most needed. We did a cost benefit on renting them, and if you're using them more than 6 months, it makes more sense to buy them. So the pickup truck's your earlier question. The service truck is the electrical division does not have a service truck. They take out the bucket truck every time they get a call. So if they're just checking a light, they need whatever they need for tools inside the control box, but they don't need a ladder. They don't need the bucket truck. So then there's less hours on the bucket truck. So that's the intent of the service truck. They've never had one.
Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at some of these pickup trucks, though, 60,000 miles on a pickup truck and you're replacing it. There's another one with 42,500 miles. Another one with 43,500 miles. I mean, I've got 65,000 on my Explorer, and I'm certainly not looking at any time soon replacing it. So I look at those, and even looking at the repairs, you know, $4,000 over 5 years, that's $800 a year. That's nothing excessive. $2,000 in repairs over 5 years, that's $400 a year. That's nothing. And the same thing, $2,300 over 5 years is a little over $400 a year. That's minuscule. So I don't understand why we're looking at replacing vehicles that are not high mileage and not costing us a lot of money. So I just picked out those three out of this whole list. But that's where I'm coming from on eliminating those, that the vehicles should still be serviceable.
A lot of the problems is rust, because these are vehicles that are out in the winter, the supervisors' vehicles out in the winter. And so the rust you're not seeing on a repair, because we're not painting vehicles. That's a piece of the budget that's cut all the time. So that's why in the future we're looking at our paint bay. But part of that is rust, not mileage, or it's things we're not repairing.
Well, of course, it doesn't say that in the description, so that's a little misleading for us to question it. And perhaps some pictures of the vehicles that we're questioning, so that we can make an evaluation of that. Not only the mileage and repairs that have been charged, but also the condition that they're in. That would be helpful for when we deal with this on a parking lot. Thank you.
Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the director, looking at these pickup trucks, we've gone out to bid several times in the last year. Your finance committee is told that there are no regular cab pickups out there, that manufacturers are not making them. They're making the crew cabs, the extended cabs, because that's what people want to buy. Is this what you're looking for, just regular cab pickup trucks? If that's the case, we can't get them, so why budget for them?
because we need to grab them when we can. I think the Finance Committee just approved, I think it was 3 pickup trucks because we found them on the lot. They saved them for us. We got them. So we are grabbing them when we can get them. Because like I said, it's twice as much to rent and lease these for the summer or for a year long. Our operations supervisor was in a rented truck.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Pease.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just that I just read in the paper where the county commission just spent $40,000 for a truck that has 96,000 miles on it. I wish they would have known. We could have given one of ours for $40,000 with 45,000 miles.
So I'm a little confused. When we, I apologize. Thank you.
Councilor
I'm a little
Loshiko.
confused. When we started talking about rentals, when it came into your department, and this one's renting from this one, and this one's renting from that one, I was always thinking we owned them and we're just renting it to another part within. How many vehicles are we renting from Jim's Rent-A-Relic or from Lee Dodge, Lee Olds, or whomever? How many vehicles are we renting, and how much are we spending on renting vehicles?
The two different things, the internal charges,
Uh-huh.
well, what you're talking about in our operating budget that you see for every department, they rent from the municipal garage. The other category is seasonal workers. So the seasonal workers that we have use the rented vehicles. So I'm guessing 10, but I can get you more information back on that.
And I guess, like Councilor McCarthy, maybe just clarifying that in the budget, that these are rental vehicles that we're renting from a local dealership or something to that effect, or maybe I missed it.
It's leasing service.
It's in a whole different account.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not seeing those, everything we're talking about here is purchasing.
When we went down through,
When we, yes, we
the
talked
budget.
about the rental of vehicles, and my understanding, and Tracy, you can correct me, there were very few fluctuations with rentals, because it's been relatively stable, particularly in the requests, because even though the rental rates may have gone up, the need to rent as many or for the duration has gone down, because we're having trouble getting some of those temp workers.
I would just agree with Director Renchick. You're absolutely right. If we're renting 3
Yeah.
vehicles, sometimes it's cheaper just to buy the vehicle. And I never even questioned it when we were going through Public Works, because I was under the understanding that it was from department to department, not out on the street. So I come back to just a recap, cutting a half ton, cutting a 3/4 ton, cutting both electric pickup trucks. And if there's a real need, then maybe looking back at gas pickup trucks. Cutting the electrical powered litter picker. That would be my suggestion, and that ends it for my part right here. I'll leave 37 to a little bit later.
37 what?
Page 37
Oh, I
on
see.
that next page.
Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. I would just point out that in our LCIP book, the electric pickup trucks cost less than the gas pickup trucks. So it seems like if we need to get something, then it seems like it would make sense to go with the electric, both for the lower purchase cost and the lower operating costs.
Councilor Pease?
Just a question on that, vehicle being less money. Do we have charging stations for electric vehicles, or do we have to put those in too at another cost?
We have 2 going in as part of the new fueling station, the low, not the expensive ones, the cheap ones. I don't know what the language is on the EV charges. And we have a workshop coming up on that. There's some grant money out for being support for the I-95 corridor. Lewiston is a city that has been that we want to participate in that, but we just discussed this today, to bring that to workshop, to say, do we start looking at those grants? It's still a 20% match. What's that gonna look like, and where would they be? And it would be, throughout the city, whether it's parking garages. It's not in the budget. There's no grant that would pay for the ones for us to do our own equipment, but we feel like we have to come up to date with having something available and start looking at experimenting and trying electric vehicles to transition over.
Sorry, Councilor. So since some of these on page 80 are going to be replacement, we're going to purchase them instead of then renting, right?
Correct. The rental vehicles are just for seasonal employees. That's in the operating budget.
Gotcha. Could you create a, perhaps a little document for us to show us what would be the net effect of these? Because if we were to purchase some of these, we would then decrease in rental costs for vehicles. Am I understanding that correct?
No.
They're replacements, if you read the description.
They're replacements.
Replacements, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I will get you a summary on that, with the damage and pictures and a little bit more details.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you. I had just, I think maybe 3 things on my list.
Okay.
Number 17, and they weren't necessarily to remove them either. I just was questioning, because you had deferred, a couple of the ones you deferred, the access door security system, 6 additional doors. I just want to make sure that it's not going to affect any security thing. That was my question on that
I
one.
haven't, that's still in.
That is still in,
That
okay.
is still in.
Okay.
At this point, it's to wrap up the project at City Hall. There were some doors when we did the project that were missed, and/or when we changed things around the administrative suite.
Yep.
That caused for additional doors.
Okay. And then the other thing I was wondering about was, now, how about the smoke ejectors? Was that one?
That would be my fire chief, and it's still in the budget.
That one is still in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that stayed in. I was concerned. I thought maybe I read the list wrong.
No,
But,
that's still
okay.
in the budget.
Okay, perfect. All right. And then the other thing I had, because they were covered, you covered a few things that I had. But I did have a question, and I don't know. This takes me back to being on the school committee with Mr. Tom Shannon. So I looked at, was it line 79, the armory door for $3,000 for a men's room's door, and my mind went directly to the government charging $20,000 for a toilet seat. I don't know why, but I was like, $3,000 for a door? Why? That seems a lot to me. So what kind of door is this?
Yes, please step right up and tell us about this very special door.
So, yes, very expensive, but it does include a small partition, floor to ceiling, door frame and hardware. Right now, by itself, installed, is about $2,000.
Okay. I was just curious. I was hoping it wasn't just the door. It's okay. All right, I'm good. That's all I had.
And Louis, those are fire-rated metal ones, or no?
In this case, it's not. This is just a standard commercial door.
Okay, this commercial ones, okay.
Fire it every 10 times that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Line item 31, relocation of technology in the police training room. Is that to relocate it to the new building, or is that just within the building?
No, that's to the new building.
Okay, now that makes sense. Thank you.
Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to make the chief stand up again, fire chief, but a couple of questions. I tried to catch you before you sat down, chief, but looking at item 34, public safety equipment for fire, a rescue basket. Are we talking, what, Stokes basket, or?
Yes, it would be a Stokes-type basket. Right now, the ladder truck has an old metal one, and we want a more modern, it'll be a polymer one. It'll slide across the ice and snow much easier.
About $900 from what I can see online, so. Just, I questioned the 5,000. It seemed a little steep, that's all. Command cabinet. What exactly is a command cabinet? This is for a vehicle, I take it?
It would be for the rear of the Suburban, the captain's command vehicle.
Okay. This affords them working tools at a fire and?
Yes, that is right. It would be, it's laid out professionally for that. It would have, docking station for the MDT and the radio chargers and all that stuff.
And finally, item 38, the air compressor for Central Station.
Yeah, so Central Station has the original air compressor from the 70s.
Is this breathing air or?
No, this is just compressed
In-house
air
air
for
compressor.
industrial air. Yeah,
Okay.
so the compressor is old and the piping is really inadequate. What we wanted to do was provide air drops for each of the apparatus bay to plug them in. As the trucks get older, they leak air. They need to be plugged in. We don't really have, it's not really set up for that. So it's basically just upgrading the compressed air system for the next 50 years.
Okay, each station has a compressor, I assume.
Small compressors.
And what about breathing air? Do you have a system for that?
We don't, but I want to incorporate that into the Station 5 build.
What do you do currently for breathing air?
We go to Auburn.
And
We fill our bottles at
We
Auburn.
charge for that in Auburn, or
We don't,
is that part of a mutual aid?
well, it is, we share the compressor, but I'm not really sure. I've never seen a bill from them, so I'm not really sure how much we
Do we
share,
have a
but they let us
cascade
use
system or
it.
anything?
Huh?
Do we have a cascade system in-house?
We don't. Auburn has it.
Auburn has
And we go over to Auburn every time we have to fill bottles, probably at least once a week. And after every incident, our policy is if we have 10 bottles that need to be filled, we go fill them.
Okay, thank you. Guess if we could, the rescue basket needs to go on the parking lot. And I guess I'm good with the others for now. Thank you.
Councilor Jelinas.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to say, when I looked at the booklet and then looked at the sheet that you sent, it was not lost on me the amount of deferments to the tune of $208,000 that were done. And I know these are tough decisions because all of these purchase requests, make good sense. These are tough decisions for sure. So I just want to say that, that's not lost on me, I'm sure, and others as well. So thank you for that work. I quickly would request maybe just more information about line item number 5. I was going to get you earlier when you were up, the Director of IT MIS. I just want to make sure when I look at that 69,100 PCs, laptops, tablets, webcams, that's stuff that's all aging out, I suspect.
It is, yeah. We run a 7-year replacement schedule on that hardware, and
we're there.
And that's
okay.
Yeah.
I definitely get the thin client, so I got you on. Thank you. The next one is number 23. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get my paper. The pressure washing rotation thing. Is that something that we do in-house? Help me understand the cost of that. Is that, again, a cycle that we're on?
I'll wait for my facilities.
Okay.
Yes, that's something we try to cycle through each garage, is to get the interior of the garage, the dust and the other miscellaneous things cleaned off, so it keeps the paint lasting longer.
So that's an annual request, pretty
Yes.
typical, that comes forward to us. Okay, good. Number 32, which is, well, actually, I'm okay with that now, because I think Councilor LaChapelle got some clarity there. I was just wondering about the process, but hearing that the clerk of the works is doing all of that work, that made sense, but that had jumped out at me originally, so I'm good with that now. Number 72, I guess I would ask Director Brenchek if that's a public safety issue as well. Does some of that repair work have to be done because the building's just unsafe, and it's the upper A masonry repairs for $24,000?
That is one of the entrances to the mills. I don't know if you understand. We have power generation rooms at the end of the mills, so anyways, it's all crumbling. We don't have a really quick solution to giving these to the mill owners or removing this.
Yeah.
They're pretty complicated, so we do need to keep those entrances in working order. So that was delayed last year, and it was moved forward for this year because we couldn't get to it.
Okay.
So I feel like it's just going out to bid. We need to get that specialty work done before it crumbles, which would be a lot more expense.
All right, appreciate that. And then the last one's for you too, Director. Oops. Sorry, this is my last item. And again, these are questions. I just want to have better understanding. It's the one for $50,000, item number 97, pardon. And I think Councilor LaChapelle brought this one up as well, if I remember. the Public Works Vehicle Wash Facility Design.
Yeah.
Um,
Could it wait a year is what I think I have in my notes, and it could.
Okay, so I would have that, that's the one item I would say out of the 5 that I've questioned, 4 that I've questioned, that's the one that I would request or support going out to the parking lot as well. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before she sits
Counselor,
down.
yes.
Director, looking at, you've got 2 different things in here for fire alarms. One under repairs to the existing, and then item, where are we at here? $200,000
101.
for a fire alarm system for Public Works buildings.
Anybody's help on that one?
What line? 200,000,
It's on 37.
is it 101?
Why am I not seeing this?
The new paper.
This is,
To make up the whole facility.
That is, yeah, that's an LCI. Mary Ann, I think that's your split in the shop area.
It's just not, right. Yeah. What is that? Separation of buildings.
Oh, so we have a firewall, well, what should be a firewall if we were up to code and not just relying on being grandfathered, that separates the equipment bay from the office section. And that's just, so this is mislabeled on here. That's the $200,000.
okay, so it's labeled as a fire alarm system when in effect it's a
Firewall.
firewall?
Yes.
Okay. That would make more sense.
Hang on, I just want to let, Mary Ann, turn to page 53 and have them read that again. I just want to clarify that that's correct. LCIP, page 53.
It's actually a notification system. No, that's a.
The design.
I apologize, the 40.
Please use the mic.
40,000 is for design services to give us all the documentation we need to meet the code to replace the firewall or to bring it up to code.
That's the 40,000?
That's the 40,000. That'll lead, and then in the LCIP, the construction cost would be covered or requested in 25.
Okay. The item on page 53 that you referred to, Administrator, that describes that as a fire alarm system. That's,
I think we need to gather and discuss these,
yeah, we need a dictionary or something perhaps?
yeah, just to make sure.
You're saying that you'll coordinate and come back to us on that?
Yes, we will.
I
Excellent.
appreciate that. It's
Anything,
confusing.
anything further, Counselor
No,
Clement?
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You may have a seat for now. Counselor Peace? Can, oh, jeez.
Just hang around there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Pull
Mayor.
up a chair.
My question is we spend a tremendous amount of money on engineering, professional supervision, observations, I guess you would call it. Why can't we do any of that in-house? We have, how many engineers do we have?
We have 4 engineers,
Yeah.
and we have about 63 projects, several $1 million. And the projects that we do, every one of those 63 projects has 12 steps, from concept to putting it in our asset management program. When we contract out, we really are just contracting out the 4 steps in the middle, which is the CAD work and the design. We're still doing all the bid documents, we're still doing all the preliminary concepts, the public process, and then when it gets to construction, the construction inspection. So it's that piece in the middle. And we did a comparison for Bangor, and Bangor, I think, has 9 engineers to our 4. We're the same size. Portland has 36, but, we're talking Bangor is a good comparison.
Okay, so you're telling me it costs us an additional $700,000 for design of the fire station, over and above all we're spending on our engineers to do the preliminary work?
Right. we still have work that we do on getting that beginning pieces out and the end pieces out. So we also only have civil engineers, so anything to do with architecture is a different engineering group. There is money that can be saved in capital projects if we expanded upon our engineering group. So our civil group focuses on the pipe work, because the pipe work is confidential. We don't want everyone to know where our water lines are. We don't want to share those files. So a lot of our in-house work is done on the utility side and the miscellaneous projects here or there. But the big HVAC systems, the big architectural projects, that's what our master services contracts do. And one engineer couldn't do that project. We're hiring a whole firm.
Okay, I'm a little short-handed here tonight because I forgot my LCI book and all my notes. But we also, and I'm going back to the fire station, $700,000 for Main Street. And if you look at the one that's designed or talking about for Lisbon Street, it's another $700,000. And we just got done doing the North Temple, the Sabata Street, moving the new location there, and we spent $700,000 there. Why aren't we not using the same design on all of them?
A short answer is they're site-specific. They're hosting different equipment. They're on a different site. Some of that is being reused. There wasn't a cookie cutter like you're making a modular home at each one of those. They're way more complicated than that. So part of it is the size of the equipment, and I know that for the Lisbon Street one, I know they're looking at that renovation as opposed to replacing it, but the other ones needed to be replaced.
Well, I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm getting at is how much it's costing us just for design and overseeing it. And it's a repetitive thing. I have a hard time believing that there's that much difference between one station to the other to warrant another $700,000 design.
All I can say is if they were the same exact site and you were just putting them on the same spot, you know, like the same size site, but we're in between buildings and different site considerations on different places. So, I mean, the site work we do, the buildings we really don't have anything to do with.
Okay, well, I'm going to let it go for tonight, but I want to come back to it at some point. Thank you.
We haven't even touched page 37, which that's on page 37.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Brunchick. And yes, we have city engineers. We don't have city architects.
Well, that's excuse.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if I may, Director Brunchick, the point that she was making, if we had those positions in-house, I think it would certainly add to the amount that we're paying for staff.
So at this juncture, I guess I owe you some pictures of some vehicles, some information on rental. We need to vet the police SUVs as well as the fire alarm system and walls at Public Works. So with the exception of those, looking at the other reductions that were mentioned tonight, if I could get a general thumbs up to reduce them, that would be great, so we could move forward. So,
If I may, Administrator first, do we still have more to talk about?
We still have page 37. Is
it's
that something?
this is fund balance.
Oh, fund
Page
balance.
37 is LCIP.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, thank you.
So, the marketing, reducing it by $80,000.
Excuse me.
1, 2, 3, 4, okay. The rescue basket, eliminating the $5,000 for that, that's in the fire department.
Cut it by 4,000.
I'll go with 4,000.
Okay. The 50,000,
Councilor Pease, did you have something?
Clarification on that. Are we reducing it by 1,000 or are we
No, reducing
reducing
it by 4,000, because
leaving
Not
1,000.
$5,000. $1,000 ought to get them a decent up-to-date Stokes basket.
Okay, thank you.
The next one is the decorative light poles. reducing that, the full 50,000 to 0. Okay, so that's staying in. The trailhead at Garcelon Bog, the lighting of that, 12,000, eliminating that. Okay, so that's still in. The tree purchases, reducing that after encumbering the 8,000, reducing that by the $12,000. Reducing the public art fund by 17,500. Reducing the destination amenities by the full 100,000. Eliminating the Ali Sculpture Plaza.
If I may, Administrator, I think we were waiting on more info from that. You wanted more info?
I did.
Yeah, I thought that's what you said.
Is there someplace else that we could put it that it's not gonna cost us so much money?
Well, the reason, sorry, if I may speak to that.
Please.
Yeah, so you saw where it's going to be out in front of Mill 5. So I think that's a highly visible location. And yeah, I think it's going to add a lot to the gateway of our city.
Can we not put it in Dufresne's Plaza? We're tearing that whole thing up anyways. We're fixing it all. Can't we put it right in the heart of downtown? It's just money at another blessed park. You know how I feel on parks. We have enough of them. We're already tearing apart one of them. Why not move it to the Dufresne Plaza that we're redoing it anyway? So the cost would be far less than, oh, I've stirred some hornet's nest. There we go.
Well, do we have, who was running point on that for staff? Was it?
I know Lincoln was doing that, but I'm not sure he's behind me. Okay.
Oh, I guess,
need
if
that
I may,
there.
Councilor LaChapelle, Director Jeffers, please bring us up to speed with, yeah, the sculpture and why it's there and so on and so forth. Because I understand you've had many conversations with Tom Platz and Gabrielle Russell, correct?
Yeah, and Charlie Hewitt, actually, who is the
And-
artist
yes,
who's
thank
done Rattle, sort of a native son, who really was the brainchild behind this. He has wanted to celebrate the Ali fight that happened here, I think 50-plus years ago at this point. And there's no other statue in the U.S. that's a sculpture of Ali. I think the only, surprisingly, there's a mural, I believe, in Louisville. And this was sort of, when it was first conceived, it was about 3 years ago, and it was to be the start of a sculpture walking trail. And some of those pieces have already started to come. As we're looking at how we start celebrating the canals, this was going to be very visible right on Main Street, right by Bates 5. The original concept was actually to have the statue where it is and then step down to the canal and then have a walking trail along the front of Bates Mill number 5 between the canal and Bates 5. And again, just getting people down close, touching the water. So this latest iteration is the second time it's been shrunk in size. I guess it's just it's sort of staying with that original concept. How do we make this a destination, get people coming in off of the highway, hearing, oh my God, there's this great statue of Ali, and then we'll discover other things downtown. So it's part of our economic development strategy, give people a reason to come to town. It was a big part of the driver. And yes, I mean, it has, Jeff is here, I think the prices have, it was at least 3 times, it was 160, we're down to 60, I think originally it was pushing 2. So we have shrunk it multiple times. And I think this is the first iteration. It could go, I know you love parks. But in time, this is a small piece of that. But
And sorry, please continue, Director Jeffers.
no, I mean, it's really, it's there. I mean, this is also really supporting, this is private sector funding. It's $250,000 that has been raised locally to see this happen. The sculptor is internationally known. His name
Prusak or something. It's something it hasn't stayed with me, but he has sculptures as you go around the country. There's, golfing icons. There are other boxers that he's done. He's got a great piece, I think in Cincinnati, where it's sort of a wall, and there's sort of sculptures coming out of the wall so you can see the pocket they've been in. So he's a pretty well-known sculptor with his own following as well. And it's really, the city would be supporting a lot of private sector fundraising with this.
Yeah, the city's not, and just to be clear, the city's not paying for the sculpture. That's being donated by community members, and then we're prepping a site, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and I guess my only concern with putting it in Dufresne is that the sculpture is quite large, and that will decrease the usable footprint in Dufresne, and then we also have a mural in Dufresne. Like, we already have some public art in Dufresne.
So one of my concerns is not just the statue, it's the proximity of the Veterans Park area. With Mr. Ali, now I'll make it quite clear, I brought Muhammad Ali back to Lewiston in 1995. I spent a lot of time with him. So I can appreciate the historical significance of that fight for Lewiston, Maine. That was the first ever televised boxing match ever. That was the first one that took place here in Lewiston, Maine. It was a fluke that it got here, but it was here. Obviously, I would think the most appropriate place would be up by the arena where he actually fought. And where it's really close to Veterans Park right there, and I don't want to get into the political part of it, but how he stood on his service, it just comes into question. I just don't think that's the right location for it. I'm not necessarily against the statue. I think three most important things: location, location, location. I just don't think that's the right location for it. And spending another $60-some-odd thousand on it, even though it was from $230 down to $60,000, is still a lot of money.
Councilor Scott.
Thank you. So first, I would just like to say that I would have to agree with the Dufresne Park comment that the mayor just made, that, we do events in Dufresne Park. There are a lot of, the Downtown Lewiston Association does events in Dufresne Park. I would not want to put more down there because that footprint is, and, there's actually a lot of people that work at the courthouse that eat in Dufresne Park on the nice weather, so I just would not want to fill that area up. In respect to the statue and where it's located, I really see this as part of our River Island Master Plan and the whole concept we've had with art around there. We've got those pieces that were put up by Baxter Brewing. We've got some other pieces going on. There are a lot of people, I may not do this, but there are a lot of people in this country that do vacations just to go see murals and art. When we did the Blue Jay mural, that was one of the things we looked up to see, and there are people that travel. That is, they design their vacation all around that. And I see this in that location as just adding to. I understand what you said about the historical aspect. I got to say, though, and I don't want to, I got to be careful about this. I don't know that people remember what happened through Vietnam and all of that anymore. I think, as we're getting older, I'm not sure that that's still a significant political event that people would think that was, and I understand what you're saying because I know the history of all that, but I just see it as a thing that's going to just enhance what we've already put down there and enhance the work that we're going to do across the street when we're going by, you know what I mean, and we're doing that work and we start working on that area. Now we're making these walkable pieces of art along with all of these other things we're going to be doing. I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only concern with the location is where everything is up in the air as far as Mill 5 is concerned, whether it's going to be torn down, whether it's going to be redeveloped as is, what we're going to do, and I would hate to stick a park there and then have to do something different down the road or have it hinder the redevelopment of that land if they decide to tear it down and put something on it. So that's my reservation as far as the park goes. I hate spending money, that. But I'm in favor of the sculpture. I just don't know if that's the spot to do it. I don't know if we could find another spot down closer, maybe in the water the water park there at the corner of Lincoln and Main Street?
We, staff had sort of pitched that concept to Charlie and Tom, and they have been pretty tied to the same site, consistently feeling it's got the distance as you come over the bridge, it's sort of a presence as you're coming up the hill.
Or he may redevelop Mill 5 and now it's part of his property?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea was sort
may
of. Well,
play
it was-
into
it
it
was-
just a little bit.
But it was part of the whole campus
Yeah.
concept. There's the bear over sort of on the backside of Mill 3.
Loom.
Yeah.
That was done. What's that?
Loom. That's the name of the bear. Loom.
Loom, thank you. Nuances.
Okay,
But yes,
that's-
you've got the bear, you've got Rattle, you've got a mural as you're coming out of Baxter on the left. And then there was the Blue Jay. There's the mural on the fountain in Dufresne Plaza.
Okay, that's just my,
Are there still some down on
Thank
Lewiston
you.
Pawn Shop? I know they've come and got.
There are new ones coming this year.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to be clear, this site that's proposed, it is Lewiston, owned by this, it's Lewiston City property, correct?
As far as the sculpture itself?
Yes, this,
You know,
the city owns
I
this
do
plot of
not,
land.
that's a conversation I need to finish. I do not know if that will become city's ownership or theirs. Oh, the real estate? The land is city's,
That's what I'm trying to say. We're not
Correct.
putting it on private property, we're putting it on city-owned
Yes.
land.
Yes.
Correct, yes, thank you. Counselor Scott, or Counselor Harriman.
Thank you. That was one question I had, but also I would think that if we were to change the location, it might impact whether this could go forward, where they've raised money for this. I don't know if they've done any work on I don't think they've done the casting yet, but they maybe started work on the preliminary part of it. But I would think if we changed it, midstream here, then it might not satisfy all the parties involved.
yeah, I believe they have not cast it. It is supposed to be delivered in October, is when we're anticipating it. They have they've done different size iterations of it. And so I think they've got a full-size clay version at this point.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, to Director Jeffers' point, it's my understanding that it is at some level of complete.
It's in process.
Yes, it's certainly been started. Counselor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Jeffers, did I hear you say that Louisville only had a mural or a painting or something of him? I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he is a native son of Louisville under another name, right? I believe under the name of Cassius Clay, his birth name. Okay, just kind of a curious factor that I'm ambivalent as to where it goes. I would be willing to listen to other ideas. I don't think Dufresne Plaza is the best place for it because you wouldn't have any room from the size of this thing to move around Dufresne Plaza. But if there are other ideas out there, I would not be against listening to them. I'm neither for nor against this particular location. But I just think it odd that a native son, he doesn't even, that's all he gets is a mural. I mean,
Well, yeah, I will
We're
say.
adopting him now.
I was surprised as well, because I thought he was from Louisville. I knew that. There was quite a bit of art, buildings named after him, various things, but there was not a statue.
it was a long time ago. I don't think they probably still exist. I mean, my recollection of this whole fight thing, a group of adults from my hometown, I was just a little fellow when this took place, but a group of adults from my hometown came to Lewiston. And the gentleman who was organizing the motor pool said, "I'll drop you guys off and I'll be right in to join you." He dropped them off, and by the time he parked and got inside, everyone was coming out, the fight was over. It lasted somewhere around 60 seconds, so that's...
So can I get thumbs on,
Well, I haven't, sorry, 1 second, Administrator. So it was alluded to, or it was mentioned in your email, this was discussed with the previous council.
correct?
And they were supportive at that time with this location. That's my understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
I guess I would love to. I would love to bring the organizers for the sculpture here, so that way they can speak about it and the location and the sculpture, and perhaps give the council a more clear understanding of the project.
If they're going to Sounds like it's gonna get approved at $65,000 tonight.
Okay, right now it's at 70. I know you keep changing.
They at 58?
It's a tough crowd.
I guess, was the thought process from 60 to 70? Or from 70 to 60? Oh, I see. Okay. I thought, yeah.
So can I get thumbs on cutting it to 0? Because we've already cut it to 70. It's 70 on the books right now.
Thumbs down, it stays.
Okay, thumbs up is cutting it. That's all I need is a thumb up. Okay, so I don't have any, so we're okay with that. Okay, the comprehensive plan, you reduced it to $25,000. Can I have a thumbs on that one? 3, 4, okay. The PW vehicle wash facilities design, reducing that to 0 and for this particular year? Okay. So, do we want to talk about the LCIP listing? Page 37.
Well, you
Yes.
still haven't finished the rest of 36, like the trucks and all that stuff that we addressed.
No, she's going to get us more information on those. That's why we're not voting on those.
Yes, but I can do those too. You're right, there are a couple of them that we can do now. It's because I changed my page, that's why. So thumbs up on 1 half-ton pickup truck.
Thumbs up to cut, right?
Cut 1. There's 2 in the budget, cut 1. Okay, all right. Thumbs to cut 1 3/4 truck, pickup truck.
I thought we were going to wait to get more information from her on the condition of the vehicle as they replace engines.
We can do that. You want to wait on all of those, or do you? Okay.
Anything that's considered a replacement due to condition
Okay,
of the
so
vehicles.
we'll wait on those two. What about the electric pickup truck? Do you want to wait on that one too?
Yes, because they're replacements.
And the service vehicle is a new unit.
We can vote on that one.
That's for the streetlight division.
That's so we don't have to drive our very
Bucket
expensive
truck.
buckets truck around, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
We can vote on it. So you want to vote on it?
Vote thumbs to reduce that,
To cut it.
to cut it. Okay, so that's hanging in there for now. And the electric-powered litter picker to cut.
To cut.
Okay, so that's still in there for now. And then the trucks. So now we'll jump over to the LCIP. So right now, the city's portion of the.
One second, Administrator Hunter. Councilor Scott, did you have, or Councilor Harriman, did you have something?
So those were all fund balance items, so that doesn't affect the tax rate or anything?
That's correct.
It's just fund balance?
Correct.
Okay, and then the LCIP also doesn't affect the tax rate, but it would be what we bond?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So right now, with the adjustments, sliding some of the projects over to fund balance and then massaging them there, the city still has, on the city side, not including school department, has $13,537,893 worth of projects. They are made up of canal ownership projects at $500,000, the Maine Street Fire Station replacement project at a little over $4 million, the Armory Space Building Infrastructure Upgrade at $1,652,000. We have the PW Fueling Station Design and Construction at $2,321,000. We have the Park Street Paving and Sidewalk Rehabilitation at $355,000. Then you have the sidewalk and street maintenance program, which is your annual allocation based upon the listings that are in the book. And then the local share of the MDOT Main Street project from Longley to Pettingill.
Councilor Harriman?
Thank you. So with the cuts made to the fund balance items, could we move some of these to fund balance?
I was, yes, to answer your question directly, and then at this point, if there are absolutely projects here that the council doesn't want, I don't want to move one over only to find out it's going to come off the list anyway.
Right.
So that's kind of why I'm taking a survey.
Thanks.
Councilor LaChapelle?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the fire department, the fire station, Main Street Fire Station. Page 38 on the LCIP, you're asking $4,002,093. I echo Councilor P's concern when we look at design and engineering at $700,000. My understanding is we're taking the same building, just eliminating one of the bay. You still have professional services at $221,000. Are we using the same architect company as McMahon's, as North Temple Street? Chief, or whoever?
Yes, we are.
We're using the same one?
Yes.
Then why are we paying $700,000? I know you have to make a new set of plans. We couldn't negotiate down. $700,000 just seems ridiculous. And before we say it's just the site, the building's gonna be the same. Okay, so, I'm sorry. Let me take a step back. Is this the same design as the North Temple Street building?
Jeff, why don't you jump up, Jeff, our engineer in the room?
Get the whole gang up.
Come on up, guys. It'll be before 11 before we stop, so don't worry.
I could try, but some of the questions that you're asking, I think Jeff might have the answer to. He's the city engineer.
Sure.
Mr. Boley, if you please.
Sure. So it did, I think the original proposal started out a little higher. We did work with the architect to whittle it down as much as possible. Part of it, a big chunk of it is construction administration. It's not all design. I don't remember the number, Brian. I think the construction side of it was a couple $100,000 just in itself.
Yeah, it appears to be 221.
Right.
Correct.
That includes meetings, almost weekly, some remote, some on-site. As far as the site, this site does include design of the road to get to it, because it's on a unbuilt road. So there's a lot of utility design and site work to go with it.
How long's that road? How big's the road?
It's 420 feet. As far as the building itself, I think there were some changes. We walked the site. Chief could speak to some issues that they had with the original North Temple that they wanted to tweak a little bit.
So it's the same building, basically, without one of the bays?
It is basically.
Correct.
It's reversed, but just because of the way the site is.
Okay.
The doors are on the other side, so it's kind of a mirror image with some shifting around. Due to the soils on the site, they have to design the foundation based on the site soils.
So North Temple, and I'm not trying to pester you, North Temple, they took everything out and brought new soil in. They took everything out. I'm assuming they're gonna do the same thing here. So how is I can't justify $700,000. I put a road in that was 400 feet, and Mr. Hediger charged me a lot less than $700,000 to put that road in. So I can't justify $700,000. And then once we had a balance, so maybe you can help me, station number 4, is that, maybe that's for the chief. Station number 4, is that the North Temple station? Station number 4? So we had a $710,000 carryover from station number 4. So I cannot fathom how $700,000, I understand the professional services, I understand construction, so with that, we can batter this around all night long. I suggest pulling $500,000 out of that and bringing that down to $3,500,000 instead of $4 million.
If I may, Counselor?
Oh, by all means.
So this is an outside charge, right? This is heading to the architectural firm, correct?
Right. The bulk of it is with Context, who includes a couple of subs, Thornton Tomasetti for the structural design. There's mechanical HVAC design, which a lot of that is repeating from the past station with a few minor changes. And then separate consultant for the site and road design, another one for the soils. So it involves a lot of different consultants.
Right, and I guess I'm not sure that the architectural firm will just eat that. I guess if we can just get a breakdown of what that 700 entails, that would be helpful. And I would recommend the council wait for that and look at that breakdown before we ultimately decide. Councilor Pease?
Yes, I'd like to have a breakdown of all the differences between one station and the other, and what justifies that cost. Thank you.
Councilor Scott?
Thank you. I think this might still be a question for Mr. Boyer. Do we, on the original plan for the North Temple, does the city own the design plan for that? Or does the architectural firm own the design plan for that?
I believe we do.
Because if we own the design plan for that, can't we use that for the new design plan? And that might eliminate some of our costs? And I'm only saying that because I'm on the facilities committee with the school department, and we have done that with some of the HVAC system for the high school, and able to now negotiate with other firms to get a lower price on doing that work. So if we own that design, and that design is not particularly that different, and it includes the dirt and everything else, I think that maybe that is something actually worthwhile looking into, just to see if that's something that we can work with. Just to look at it, at least, I would be up for that. Because if we own those plans, then we can work with those plans, it would be my understanding, but that's how we've done it on the school department. I just would like to check.
They are using basically the same design. It's the hourly rates are a lot higher than they were 5 years ago.
And the city does own the plans, Councilor Scott.
Okay.
And we are reusing those, but they actually came in with much higher, and we actually were telling them very similar things. What you're saying is, why are we paying more? Well, this should be less than what you were saying before. However, there are the costs that are associated with, and this is the engineers all talking, but just the site itself, the land, there is some, believe it or not, there's some wetlands over in the old racetrack that when we, that's why the positioning of it. But I think the engineers can probably give you a better understanding of what that money is going to be used for, that $700,000.
But we still stripped all the land off of North Temple Street. We did all that. So, and we obviously had a $700,000 overrun because it just got transferred to this new fire station. So my real what's the $700,000?
It's not an overrun, it's a surplus.
Okay, correct. It is $700,000 surplus. We didn't go over budget. So I was about ready to criticize my second grade math. Apparently I didn't. So my second grade math says we're still in a plus $200,000. If I'm looking to take only $500,000 off from it, we had a surplus of $700,000. That's still a $200,000 plus. It's the same blessed building, and I just got done complaining to the school department and everybody else that we have to be good stewards of our money and make sound decisions. I cannot justify giving somebody $700,000 for the same damn plan that we did already. With give me it and I will make the plans and I'll charge you $10. I just can't do it.
Well, and if I may, for the, So when we're talking about moving doors, because we're deleting a bay and then moving the doors to the other side of the building, did I hear that correctly?
No.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not. It's a little more complicated
It's a
than that.
CAD move. It's a CAD move. I designed this stuff. It's a CAD move. And I don't want to downplay the quality of some of these engineers and what they do. I just can't look the taxpayers in the city of Lewiston in their face and saying we're paying $700,000 for the same design that we put on North Temple Street. They're doing the same thing.
Absolutely hear you. We're going to head to Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to fly in Councilor LaChapelle's face here for a moment because I said that fire department was one of the primary things we have to take care of. The city committed to rehabbing or replacing these 3 stations, the 3 substations, 6, 7 years ago. The North Temple Street plans, I believe, those figures are at least 5 years old in some instances. And you can't buy a 2x4 today for what you bought one for 5 years ago. I mean, I think we need to look at, we haven't even bid this one out yet, have we? No, are we going to be looking to bid this within the next 6 months, maybe?
Chief, what's the timetable? Or Jeff?
Yeah,
or
we had a
Brian?
meeting this morning, I think it was.
Yeah, we should be putting out to bid beginning of the summer, I think it was. July. Putting it out to bid.
Now, I think we've got to have some firmer figures, and I'm all in favor of listening to whatever we can get for information here before we make a decision on cutting $500,000.
The 700,000, oh, sorry.
Yeah, to your point, I think if we could have a breakdown of what this 700 entails, that would be.
That sounds high. I don't think it's really that much. I'm not sure where you're getting the 700,000.
Right out of the LCIP.
Yes, it's right out of the LCIP, Jeff.
Okay.
We'll get back to you on the detail.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Have a bake sale or whatever.
Councilor Peace, did you have something to add on this before we moved on?
Yes, reference to what Councilman Clement said. Yes, you can't buy a 2x4 for what you paid for it 5 years, 10 years ago, but it's going in the same spot.
True,
That's
but
what we're talking about, designing is going
it's
in
more
the same
expensive,
spot.
yeah.
Yeah, but has nothing to do with the engineering portion of it.
We're gonna get
That
input.
has to do with the building portion.
Well, I think we've heard that we own the plans, and we're going to find out if we can't negotiate with somebody to.
They'll administrate.
Cheaper.
Sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. I think Administrator Hunter and Jeff and everybody will be getting back to us on that.
That's correct. Are there any other LCIP projects you want to chat about?
Councilor LaChapelle.
I'm not going to put my hand down. Yes, the fueling station. If we look on page 59 of your LCIP book, that's $2,321,000. Again, we come back down to $750,000 for the fueling island, $160,000 for communication, which I want to know what $160,000 buys you, $550,000 for site work and utilities, and then paving of $550,000. How much land are we paving for $550,000?
I don't have the square footage breakdown for this, but this is the half of the public ops site up on the Riverside Center, right where our snow dump is. So it's that half where we're gonna have that entrance for the fueling system over there. That's right where the utilities would come into the whole site. So before we pave it, we gotta get the water line down through there as well as the drainage for that site without also working around the snow dump area. So it's that half, the entrances, and we haven't really decided exactly where all the buildings are going yet, but that's underway right now.
So how do you come up with this dollar amount if you don't know where stuff's going?
You did the
And
square
we're just
footage for what's under there.
guessing where we're gonna put stuff?
There is a square footage for that whole area being paved. Our paving manager calculated that for us.
What is $160,000 for communication?
$160,000 for communication is bringing fiber up to that location, up Alfred Floyd Parkway from City Hall, so it's there for the whole site. We need it for security, no one's gonna be there. It'll man the whole building after that.
So, I guess I need a better breakdown on site work and utilities and paving. That's $1,100,000 just on that part. How much paving are you putting in? Now, you're talking about installing The electrical, is that part of the utility
That's
site
right,
work?
the lighting is
Not just,
part.
but for electric vehicles, charging stations.
The charging station is
Is that
part
in
of that.
there?
It's 100,000
Would I be able
for
to
a
get some
charging
kind of a
station.
breakdown? Because right now, again, in the construction part, this just seems really high. I was gonna make the motion that we drop it down to at least $2 million, take 321,000 out of that budget, but 200,000, because I think we're over budgeted on that. But if you could come back with
We
more
certainly will.
information,
Yep.
just to justify how we come to those figures, I would be willing to hold off on that.
Yeah, I would like, Director Bruncheck, I would like more information before we make a final judgment on that.
Sure.
And please don't go anyplace. Stay right there. So I had sidewalk maintenance and rehabilitation, which would have been on page 70 of our LCIP book.
You're talking about the 1,046,000?
Yes, yes, 1,046,000. How bad are these sidewalks?
Past due. And there's some sidewalks, what we're doing with the neighborhood areas is if it's pieced sidewalks on both sides, we're replacing it on one side or no sides, depending on what the street is. So we're not replacing sidewalks on both sides on every new street. Some of the decision-making is keeping the trees, staying away from the power poles, making one good sidewalk on one side, unless you're in an urban area downtown, where we typically have two sidewalks, one on either side. So the pavement, one thing that didn't get approved as part of the miscellaneous services that was new, is doing a condition rating on all the sidewalks, which is really part of our pavement management program, but because we had never done a condition rating for every sidewalk in the city, we didn't get that approved when that whole page got Xed. So we don't have a condition report like we do the roads, but we'd like to do that. Right now, we're balancing whether the utilities are needed, what's there for sidewalks, if we're already there for utilities, then the paving obviously comes after that, and then what sidewalks are in place. I think we answered an email for Councilor Jelinas today that the sidewalks are in very poor shape, but we need the money to repave that road. Would have been way ahead in the schedule if we didn't have the sidewalks. But that's an area that we feel like at least one sidewalk is needed, so it pushes the project out. So this is an art. This is an art, and they're very carefully balanced with all the other work. The condition of the pavement, the condition of the sidewalks, the utility needs.
Thank you. I guess this would be for the city administrator. My next question is, we're looking at the LCIP, and to get that down to that 70 or 80%? 80. How much do we have to cut out of this? About half, I counted.
No more than that. Right now, you're at $16,923,893. Our limit is a little over $7.3 million, so we're cutting about 9.6.
Okay.
No, or pass it with a vote of...
Supermajority.
Vote of 5, yes.
The good news, or at least some, is we have a little bit of time on this. We're not adopting the LCIP till the first meeting in June.
Okay, so we can still,
We can still haggle over that, yes.
okay. Yeah, because the sidewalks sound great. The lights, the street light upgrades. I want to do street light upgrades, but we got to cut more than half out of this to stay where we should be. So I guess if we don't have to deal with this right off, I'm fine, and we can talk about this a little bit later.
I guess, you brought up some questions that obviously we need to do some research on. On the remaining questions, are there remaining projects, are there any additional questions anybody has? Because that way we can kind of vet them all at once.
Okay. Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the sidewalk that we just talked, sidewalk maintenance, you've got an area around West Bates, Summer, and Holland Street, and it says TIF agreement. What TIF agreement is that?
That I will defer to Director Jeffers on. And/or the Public Works Director.
Director Jeffers.
I was going to say, do you want to see the list?
Yeah, at this point, I do not believe the Saxon project is going to be able to secure the financing that they've been hoping for. I know we were looking to fund a lot of the street improvements over in that neighborhood, using that as the revenue stream. They are actively trying to market it. I know my department has talked with a couple of developers pitching it, saying, here's an opportunity. It's already got zoning for up to 245 units. You're not bound to that. Trying to give them some latitude. At this point, though, that project is, I think it's fair to say it's stalled, and there's not a new buyer in the wings that I'm aware of yet, although I know there were some active conversations about a month and a half, 2 months ago.
Is it, so is it listed, is that piece of property listed with a broker right now?
It is not. It's really being quietly marketed through, by Saxon. And both of the entities I spoke to actually knew. Oh, yeah, like, yeah, we know those guys. So, I mean, it's a pretty small world.
Thank you, Director.
Yep.
And I would be looking at considering taking that part of it out.
Yes, we have the same chunk of streets, if you will, for street paving as well. So we'll evaluate that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further, Councilor Scott.
Thank you. So I do want to have a discussion on this, especially where that project may not be going through, but I'd like to remind everybody that the streets over there and the sidewalks over there are pretty rough. And that neighborhood has been asking for some work over there for quite some time. There is a lot of people that walk in that neighborhood, walk through that neighborhood to get to Sunnyside Park. So let's just make sure we're looking at all of it and ensuring that we're having that conversation around. I agree that probably some of it we can look at removing, but let's make sure we're not taking it all away. Just before we have that conversation, if we can, I just want to have that conversation at looking at it.
Fair enough. And while I understand that interest rates have certainly risen, the cost of doing these projects are most likely not going to decrease over time.
That, I guess, may be debatable, because I think there is a lot of infrastructure stimulus projects that are still out. That project, or those monies, are good through 2026. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the construction field after those monies are no longer available.
Thank you. Councilor LaChapelle.
Thank you. And one last thing. I don't see it in the budget anyplace, but I know we talked about it earlier, about the trash can thing.
We are bringing that
Is
back to workshop, because
Okay.
that doesn't impact this budget. It's going to impact the next budget.
25?
Correct.
Okay.
But we are going to reworkshop that, exactly how that program will work through the various parts of our city.
Right, thank you.
I think we are set at this point, and I believe we're heading to
Hold on a
exec.
minute. Just want to get something
sorry.
too.
In
Go ahead.
your, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Administrator Hunter, what I would like to see when you refigure the LCIP, could you put the, give us a funding figure of 95%?
Yep.
Thank you.
If I may, thank you. Before we end tonight, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, for being able to answer our questions. And I specifically want to thank Administrator Hunter and Tracy for all the work that's been done already on this budget. There has been an extensive amount of work done already, and I just want you to know that I greatly appreciate what's been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all joining us this evening. We'll see you back here on Thursday.
So
And now we're
Mr.
heading to executive session.
Yep, I need to have a motion on the executive session to discuss labor negotiations regarding the Maine State Employees Association, Public Works Unit, and the Professional Technical Unit.
So moved. Councilor Clement, seconded by Councilor McCarthy. All in favor?
Thank you.